The working day was nearing its end. Ben, sitting at his desk, pushed aside a pile of documents, pushed his glasses to his forehead and rubbed his tired eyes with effort, the effect of insomnia. He hadn't been sleeping much lately, 3 hours at a time, many of them 4. And though the reason for his sleepless nights was more than pleasant, he still had to pretend to be awake at work and make some effort not to start pecking his nose. "Mary, coffee for me, black, no sugar," he shouted through the half-open door. Just then the pretty face of the new secretary appeared. "Mr. Ban, did you call for me?" He looked up at her. "Yes, I'm sorry, Helen. I'm not used to it yet." "Nonsense. So, do you want coffee?" "Yes, black, no sugar, extra strong." He's not used to it yet. That's for sure. He wasn't used to the fact that it wasn't a blonde with a stunning form that was sitting in his waiting room, but a quiet, russet-haired Helen, who looked more like a statue of the girl with the oar than anything else, as firmly bunched, collected, and reliable as a girl with an oar. In fact, Helen should be prayed for, honestly. He'd never had a more executive, organized, and intelligent secretary, and he, ungrateful, can't even remember her name. But on the other hand, it's not his fault that she's so inconspicuous, so unassuming. But no, not unremarkable, even transparent, she instantly blends in with any interior, and in half a minute you can't even notice her. She should be a scout, not a secretary. It's a shame. She's a good girl. She probably doesn't even have a boyfriend. Men don't notice a girl like her. They look through glass. "Here's your coffee," Mr. Ben said, the girl, coming back into the office with a tray in her hands. On the tray was a cup of the coveted drink and a bar of bitter chocolate. What kind of treasure was she? Even his little weaknesses remembered. Good girl. "Thank you, Helen," he thanked her sincerely, with a smile. "Remind me not to forget to give you a bonus at the end of the month." "For what?" wondered the girl. "For good work and attention to detail. Thanks for remembering the chocolate. Now get to work." He waited until the door closed behind her, picked up the phone and dialed Mary's number. "Mary," he said when he heard the familiar voice, "I'll be off by 6 today. Don't wait until lunchtime." "What's wrong with your voice?" "My voice is fine." "Well, I'm just a little tired. And I've got a meeting at a restaurant at 7:30. I want to see you in time." After that call and a sip of coffee, Ben's mood improved. Even the fatigue was gone, as if it hadn't existed, and a thought occurred to him. Girls like Helen, organized, intelligent, though boring, must somehow realize these virtues. That's why they're great workers, and the management appreciates them, and they usually make good money. But people like his Mary, well, let's be honest, she's not a good worker. Lazy, forgetful, no judgment. She made such a mess of her workplace that it took Helen, with all her skills, 2 days to sort it out. But she's so pretty, you can't take your eyes off her, and that honeyed voice. I'd listen to it forever. So she, too, is realizing her natural gifts. Not at work, of course. She's not really suited for that. It's just that there's a division. There are beautiful film stars and there are honest hard workers. There are great cooks and there are gourmets. Everyone has their own talent. And life presents us with opportunities to utilize that talent to the best advantage for ourselves and others. And that's why Helen is his secretary and Mary is his fiancée, and she's expecting him at 6 o'clock today. And Mary's had a bad day since midday, all because of Julia, that crazy but phenomenally lucky girlfriend. Mary had known her for a long time, ever since they had been 2 country girls at the railway station. Their suitcases got mixed up, and the 2 girls ran round the platform looking for a friend in misfortune, and they found one. They became friends at once. Maybe it was not the call of their hearts, but simply the way the map lay. Both came from the middle of nowhere to conquer the big city. Both had no one in the city, and no one to turn to for support and advice. They managed to rent a tiny room for 2, and then Mary saw with her own eyes that Julia was the kind of person who would fall into a hole and find a treasure at the bottom. Then, of course, life took them apart. Julia had some lover who got the girl a job at a modeling agency, and then she married not her lover, but some rich old man, who a couple of years after the wedding quietly died, bequeathing his wife all his huge fortune. But from time to time the friends met. And that was why Mary, a girl with expensive beige hair and a coat from a famous Parisian atelier, groomed to doll-like perfection, was now sitting in a dirty and dark, smoke-smelling room, looking at her grandmother, who was muttering something indistinctly, swaying in time with the words. The flame of the candle danced as if disturbed by a draught, casting glare on the walls, and eerie shadows danced on the old woman's face. The old woman, muttering something to herself, suddenly seemed the most real wicked sorceress from fairy tales. Everything fit together, and her unkempt hairdo, the gray wisp of hair above her forehead, just in case a breeze picked it up, and her face was thin, bony, with a hooked nose, and her wrinkles were not human, but rather cracks in the dry clay and earth that had not seen rain for a long time. The grandmother cast a quick glance at her and continued muttering. Only now it was not the usual hurried half-whisper, but something like poetry. She spoke in a chant. But Mary could catch no words, no definite motive, no rhythm. It's strange, she went on, because when I came here, grandmother seemed so ordinary. It was true. A simple door, upholstered in cheap sodding. You don't see them much nowadays, they're all hiding behind iron doors. What kind of sod? It's shabby, kind of red. It's been a long time since anyone's done any renovations around here. That's true. The door surprisingly harmonized with the shabby entrance, with its unforgettable specific smell, gray concrete walls, half painted in green, and on top, painted rock paintings of local savages. And it was all oddly soothing. Mary, I remember, had had her heart in her heels 10 times on the way here. There was something scary about it. And the feeling of absurdity, or indeed absurdity, in which for some reason she voluntarily agreed to participate. After all, real witches do not live in ordinary city flats without hiding and quietly accepting clients. Witches, they hide from people in the forests, in the thickest part of the woods. What's going on here? I was sitting with my friend Julia in a cafe. I was sharing my feminine concerns, and Julia said, thoughtfully, "There's this girl I know." So Mary was surprised. I have acquaintances too. Or are you implying something? Julia shrugged her shoulders uncertainly and frowned. Are you going to laugh? She clarified. If not, you can watch me. I won't tell you anything. No, I won't, Mary promised. What did you want to say? Julia even bent over the table. She leaned closer to her friend and whispered quickly and hotly. Anyway, she's a witch. She's real, you know. She can do anything she wants. And for a price, you know. You should go see her. Maybe she could help you. Don't drink any more, Mary said firmly, pushing the glass away from her friend. Let me get you a coffee. Do you think I'm drunk? Julia grumbled. Then she quickly scribbled an address on a napkin and handed it to Mary. Here, take it and think what you like. But if you're in a pinch, use it. Don't thank me. Then she stood up and walked soberly towards the exit. Mary remained seated at the table, clutching her napkin. It was creepy to look at her, and I wanted to. I wish there was some harmless joke in it. I sort of bought it, because I knew that if she looked at it and read the address, she would not give up. And now, standing in front of a shabby door and a shabby entranceway, she suddenly felt the calm she had already missed filling her whole being again. What witches? What witchcraft? Please, she thought. Now some old dandelion lady will open up to her. Well, maybe she'll laugh when she finds out Mary's come to see a witch. She'll say it was a friend's joke. A simple soul, she believed it. Or she'll be angry that they keep coming and coming. There's no peace from them. Mary was almost right. The door was opened by a very ordinary grandmother. Where did they get them from? In a flowered dressing gown. Her slippers were shabby too, with stubby backs. A grandmother and a grandmother. Nothing special. Except for one thing, she had a sharp, wary look in her eyes. Oh, it's you, she grumbled, letting her guest through the threshold into the flat. Have you brought any money? How? What money? Mary was confused. What kind of money? Ordinary money. A favor. Well, it's always like that. Take your shoes off. You'll trample all over my floors. Come on. Mary obediently threw off her new boots, fresh from the shop, and looked around, not knowing where to put them. Are you afraid they'll be stolen? Mockingly stretched out the grandmother. Don't be afraid, put them over there. She pointed to a low dresser with its doors open wide. Mary noticed it at once, but thought it must have been the dresser she was going to throw away. So she put it close to the door. Turns out it wasn't. It was a piece of furniture. She quickly put her boots on the lowest, cleanest shelf and followed the landlady. The room they found themselves in was terribly cramped and without a single window. There was only a table and a couple of stools. Mary realized, as she looked more closely, that it was more like a part of a large room, partitioned off by a wall. Sometimes owners do this. They divide a room in a 2-room flat by a wall, so that they can proudly state in the advertisement that they are selling a 3-room flat, and of course sell it for more money. Sit down. From a desk drawer she took out a small saucer and something else wrapped in a cloth. Mary picked up her purse again. You see, that's what I've come to do. I know, her grandmother interrupted her. You keep quiet. Sit down. She lit the candle, dripped melted wax on the bottom of the saucer to make it stand straight, and flicked the switch. Keep quiet, she reminded him sternly. And the muttering began, and the furious dance of the candle fire, and the shadows dancing on the walls, and the eerie glare on the old woman's face. Mary was suddenly truly frightened, but not of witchcraft. She was frightened by the expression on her mistress's face. It was just a sudden thought. What if the old woman was simply mad, and there was no way out of this horrible, stuffy room, in which she seemed to have been sitting for 1,000 years? Suddenly she had a terrible desire to go outside, to breathe fresh air, to see the sky above her head. I don't feel well, she said, and felt herself slipping off the stool. The old woman did not look at her. She kept muttering, humming her incantations, swinging back and forth like a pendulum. Mary tried to get up and collapsed unconscious on the dirty floor. She woke up to a splash of cold water in her face. Mary shuddered and saw her landlady leaning over her with a glass in her hand. "How weak you are," she said in the same tone of voice. "All right, it's ready. Get up." "What's ready?" Mary asked in a weak voice. "Just what you need. You'll find it wrapped in a cloth in your bag. You can unwrap it at home. Then stick it in your man's pocket, in the lining of his jacket, wherever you can." "And the money?" The old woman sniggered. "I already took it myself." "How much did you need?" "All of it. Get out of here." Mary struggled to her feet. Her knees were trembling. The landlady nudged her in the back and forced her out into the corridor. She pulled her boots out of the dresser, and only when she was 2 floors down did she realize that she was still holding them in her hand. Outside, a fresh breeze blew on Mary. Her mind began to clear. She sat down on a makeshift, roughly constructed bench in the driveway and began to put on her shoes. Some grandmother who had followed her into the street gave Mary a scornful look. "And another," she said, and walked on. Mary looked after her. "1 minute you're fainting, the next you're oblivious. Some pensioner can't go about her retirement business in peace. She has to say something nasty. I can't wait to get out of here, to get to a clean, well-maintained center, to be home. It is better to be at home, where there are clean entrances, smelling of floor cleaners, automatically sprayed with some pleasant fragrance, and the concierge smiling amiably." Mary sat like that in pleasant reverie for a few more minutes, then took her phone out of her purse and hailed a taxi. A new surprise awaited her. The old woman raided her purse for all the cash she had, even the small coins. Mary could hardly suppress the impulse to go upstairs again and make a row. Firstly, she just didn't want to go back to that stuffy room. And secondly, it was her own fault. She should have asked how much the favor cost. And now what? After all her bank cards were still there, and the taxi driver could be paid by transfer. And anyway, she had to hurry. Ben had promised to be home by 6. She wouldn't be able to make dinner by then, of course. But that's all right. He said he had a restaurant to go to. He had a meeting or something. Mary was usually angry at her fiance's busyness, but today it was a good thing. Let him eat it at the restaurant. Ben, for all his virtues, had one disgusting flaw. He hated to eat alone, so Mary had to keep him company at dinner. The results were deplorable. In a month, she'd already put on half a kilo and almost an inch on her waist. Of course, it's not much. But what would happen to her in 6 months of such a satiated life, and a year from now? The taxi driver, cheerfully looking in the mirror at the passenger, suddenly laughed. "Time to lose weight, you think? Don't you?" Mary shuddered. "How do you know?" "My wife's the same way," he chuckled. "When she thinks it's time to lose weight, she gets a face like yours, sad and as if hungry in advance." She smiled politely, but she didn't understand what he saw as funny in the situation. Maybe he likes his wife like that, a fat, ruddy pig with hanging sides. So he laughs. She cheers him on, giggles too, and then they go to eat fried potatoes together. That's good. With Mary, every centimeter counts, and every extra gram counts. How could it not? She's not an idiot, and she knows she and Ben are different. She's got nothing to offer him but her beauty. She doesn't read books, she watches films, women's serials. What man would be interested in that? She has no hobbies. And work. Well, let's face it, she doesn't like to work. That leaves only beauty. So that's something to watch out for. "Well, you don't need to diet," the taxi driver kept talking. "I understand there are some that another time you come to the address. And there is such a sitting, afraid how it will fit in the car. But you've got everything in place. No bones sticking out. That's a good thing. A man is not a dog. He doesn't throw himself at bones." "Will you shut up?" Mary begged. She had no time to listen to the driver's insensitive compliments. "I bet he's expecting a cash tip too." "I don't have any cash," she said. "We'll pay with a money order." The concierge smiled at the sight of Mary. "Mrs. Mary, hello. How do you do? What a beautiful coat you have on. It's Paris." "It is from Paris," Mary replied tiredly. The concierge's ebullience was pleasant, but she still wanted to be alone. "Did the groom give it to you?" "Mr. Ben? Of course he did. When's your wedding? I suppose you'll have a dress too?" "I suppose I will," said Mary, rushing into the lift. At home, she collapsed on the sofa in the hallway and pulled a beautiful rubber bobby pin out of her hair. It was always like this, when you were tired or in a bad mood. You wanted to let your hair down. Any hairstyle starts to feel like a whole house on her head. And Mary always felt as if she'd forgotten to do something very important. But what was it? "You'll find it in the bag." She remembered what the old sorceress had said. I wonder what else she should find in there, apart from her purse. Mary unzipped her purse and laughed. There it was, right there, lying in plain sight, something wrapped in a rag to put in Ben's pocket or jacket. She gently pulled the cloth away with her little finger and raised her eyebrows in surprise. Inside was a long sewing needle. Quite simple. Mother usually called such needles gypsy needles, but where would she put it? The doorbell rang. Mary hastily put it back. Quickly she looked in the mirror and gave her face an appropriate expression of joy and impatience. "I'm just opening the door, darling," she sang out, hurriedly throwing off her coat. No. Why should he know that she had recently returned home? And he didn't need to know where she'd come from. Ben, on his way to his favorite restaurant, was almost happy. Actually, the business meeting he'd just made up for his fiancée. And now, after spending an unforgettable half hour in her company, he was dreaming of a delicious dinner. Mary cooked badly and would not accept a delivery or even a personal chef, whose services Ben would have been more than happy to pay for. A woman should feed the man she loves, Mary said, and put another plate of something inedible before him, half-fried potatoes or steak. She smiled so charmingly that there was no power left to upset her. And Ben chewed heroically what was impossible to chew. He choked on half-raw pieces of potato tubers, and then furtively took pills so his fiancée wouldn't notice. But today he had a real meal waiting for him, and honestly, he was glad of it. At that time, people were already beginning to gather in the restaurant. Waiters were carrying trays, and the kitchen smelled so good that one could swallow one's tongue. Full of happy anticipation, Ben stepped into the hall and stopped confused. The hall he had expected to be lively, filled with smartly dressed people, was almost empty. Only in a corner near the kitchen, some grandfather was sluggishly picking at his dessert, and there was a girl of about 7 sitting on a high stool at the bar, sipping lemonade through a straw. Must be the granddaughter of that grandfather. The barman, catching the customer's confused look, smiled understandingly. "It's Monday. Mr. Ben, people come in later in the week." "Monday? Oh yes, that's right, I forgot. He hadn't thought of that at all. Well, never mind, he came here to eat." The waiter, who appeared silently nearby, was already leading him to his favorite table. "Don't need the menu," Ben said. "I know it by heart. I'll have a medium rare salmon, a fresh vegetable salad, and a mineral water without gas, and a brandy." "Brandy now or for dessert?" "Later." It's that old fatigue again. Or maybe it was just the emptiness of the place that was depressing. I should have brought Mary with me, he thought. But after all, what's to stop me from doing it now? I'll tell her the meeting's canceled, he decided, pulling out his phone. But he couldn't get through. Mary was talking to someone. "Julia," she complained to her friend. "It's your witch. You should at least tell me what she's like." There was a distinct chuckle in the receiver. "Is she colorful?" "No, she's not." I fainted from her coloring. I was scared. She's sitting there mumbling something over a candle. I felt sick. Stuffy scared. She didn't explain anything, and she took all the money while I was passed out. "Yeah," Julia said. Understandingly, "she's expensive. I remember I gave her a lot of money. I don't remember exactly, but a lot." "Was she worth it?" Mary grinned. "I think Granny's just putting on a circus act. Or is she really good at something?" She laughed again. "Tell me, have I complained about life in the last few years?" Mary, though she knew her friend couldn't see her, shrugged her shoulders. Julia, with her luck, has no reason to complain. Everything comes her way all her life. "And you're lucky," she replied uncertainly. "And I mean this." Julia's tone turned from light-hearted and cheerful to serious and even cold, as if she had invisibly but perceptibly pulled her friend back at arm's length. "I should know better than you. Do you think I'm just raining money on you for pretty eyes and heartfelt thanks?" Mary felt the blood rush to her head, either from Julia's unfriendly tone or from her insolence. After all, Mary knew where her friend had got the money and how she had got it, and the clamp of an aged simpleton who had forgotten about women for the last 20 years. And here is such a young girl, blood and milk, and hangs herself on his neck. How could I resist? She was ready to say it all without thinking, but Julia beat her to it. "Don't worry, your Ben will die. He's not going anywhere, and everything will be yours." Die how? For a second, Mary thought she'd forgotten how to breathe. She managed to get a breath of air, but instead of relief, she felt dizzy. She crawled to the bed and sat on the edge, but her friend didn't seem to mind. "Do you remember what we talked about in the cafe today?" "You don't remember?" "I do. You said you're tired of holding yourself in a vice from morning till night. You wanted to look like a doll, to look like this, and you don't have to work so hard. And the money's all yours, so it'll all be yours." "So you," Mary exhaled. Julia's words seemed to sober her at once. Her breath came back, and her brain began to work so clearly and coldly that she was afraid. "Is that how you got rid of your old man?" "Yes, and you prove it." Julia snapped at him. "Grandfather is old, and his wife is a girl. So he couldn't stand it, poor thing. But now I do what I want, and all his money is mine. You'll soon realize what it's like, and you'll thank me for it." "Fool," Mary cried out, "you fool. We're not married to him yet. If he dies now, I'll have nothing. And I've already put that needle in his arm." She hung up the phone and ran round the flat, dressing as she went. "At the restaurant," he said. "We've got to get in there and get that needle out, and then—" "No, stop." "What restaurant?" Ben wouldn't tell her. Mary grabbed the phone again and dialed her fiance's number, but there was no answer. Ben was lying on the floor of the restaurant, and his face was as pale as chalk. The EMT sat next to him on the floor. Over and over again, he felt his pulse, but he had a look of utter helplessness on his face. "How did this happen?" he repeated for the 100th time. "It didn't," shouted the waitress hysterically. "A man was sitting there, all right, but then he cried out and fell down. That's it. That's it. There was nothing else. I don't understand anything. His pulse is like it's going crazy. It looks like a heart attack, but it's not him. We need to get him to a hospital. But can we get him there?" "Wait," the girl at the bar said calmly. "Wait 1 minute." She quickly went into the kitchen and returned, leading a woman in an apron and rubber gloves by the hand. "Who are you?" the doctor asked as she squatted down next to Ben. "This is Cynthia, our employee," replied the bartender. "But only, Mum, what's wrong with him?" the girl asked. The woman raised her head. "A death spell. We must look. He must have a rusty nail or a long needle in the lining of his clothes. Help me." The waitress and the barman helped to take Ben's jacket off. Cynthia, keeping her gloves on, began to search him methodically, centimeter by centimeter. "Here," she said at last, and took out a long, shiny needle from the lining. "I'll take care of this now. And you," she looked at the doctor, "don't worry, he'll wake up in a few minutes." Mary ran down the street, hoping solely for luck. She remembered that all of Ben's business meetings were at his favorite restaurant not far from home, and if everything worked out, he should be there. She flew into the room. Ben. He was sitting at the far table, and across from him was a scruffy stranger in a work apron. When he saw the bride, he tilted his head to the side and grinned. "And you, Cynthia, it turns out you were right." "I don't believe it," Mary muttered. "So well, Mary, hello again." What was he talking about? Mary, rushing in, was going to apologize, to assure her that she was thinking of a trivial deflection, not a death spell, and that it was all nonsense. She'd never believed in such things, but now everything was different, and perhaps, if she played her cards right, she would ask for forgiveness. You can win at anything. That's what her father used to say. A card cheat who hid in their village from creditors. The key is to play with wit and judgment with what you've got. "Hello, Ben," she said coldly. "And you, girl?" "I don't know about you." "Hello. It's a bad time, as it happens. You've got a rendezvous, a romance, and here's a bride out of the blue." "Why is it a bad time?" Ben smiled, but not in a good way. "Not in a kind way, you are very much. Why don't you tell me about that needle that had me lying there half dead before they rescued me?" "What needle?" Mary grimaced, realizing that she couldn't fool him. "That's right." Ben shook his head. "Well, why did you come running in here screaming if you don't know what's wrong?" She couldn't play her cards right, but now all she could do was hope for luck. "I didn't know," she moaned. "Okay, honestly, I didn't know about it. And anyway, you see, I saw an old woman in the passage. She's standing there, very old, collecting alms for a penny. I felt so sorry for her. I went over and gave her 100, and she winked at me, and she held out this needle and said, 'You put it in your lover's things, and then he will never leave you. He won't even look at others.' I never believed in such things. But here, well, I just wanted to check it out. I didn't know." "Then why did you come running?" He repeated his question with inexorable gentleness, and Mary had no answer. Ben paused and looked her straight in the eyes, which were full of fear and despair. "Do I need to tell you that you and I are no longer bride and groom? Please give me back the keys to my flat. Then give me your new address, and I'll send you your things." "But whose am I?" Mary whispered, lowering her head. She knew Ben well enough, and when he made a decision, he never looked back. She waddled slowly toward the exit. There was no pain, just a fierce anger that now she'd have to start all over again, to get some kind of job again, to hang around among people, to look for a suitable fiancé. Would it work now, or wouldn't it? She's a long way from Julia. She's the one who's not going anywhere. "I'm sorry for what happened." Cynthia's voice was warm and deep. "It's like that. One day you're almost alive and you've lost your fiancé." Ben only shrugged his shoulders. "But having a man who wants you dead as a bride isn't exactly the best plan for married life, in my opinion." "It's a shame," Cynthia sighed. She was beautiful. What was she missing? "You're beautiful too," he confessed honestly. Cynthia, of course, was not well-groomed, and her beauty was peculiar. Her features are not luxurious like whipped cream, but laconic, calm, straight eyebrows, large gray eyes. Her cheekbones are prominent, but in moderation. The lips were not plump or thin, but just right for such a face, and beautifully contoured, like a statue's. "Really beautiful," he continued. "I used to draw a little when I was young. I even took some courses. A face like yours is a godsend for an artist. It's so right, you should be a model." I wish. She laughed. "Not for long, really. My father was a painter." "Your father?" "Yes, he's been dead for years. From a needle like this, too." Ben's face darkened immediately, like a shadow had fallen over him. "Only I couldn't help him. I found it after he was dead." "And then what happened? How did you know that? You know, that it was the needle?" Cynthia closed her eyes. The memories were heavy, and she didn't want to go back to them. How could she tell in a nutshell that she was her father's favorite daughter, though illegitimate, that he had spoiled her from childhood and had not wanted any other children, and her mother died early? But still, Cynthia did not feel herself deprived of love. Her father took care of her for 2, and even when she fell in love and became pregnant at 17, barely an adult, her father only waved his hand. "Don't worry, my daughter. We'll grow up, we'll bring her up. A child is a great happiness, and you'll meet your love in time." That's how we lived. A year after the birth of the child, I went to study. Dad even paid for a nanny so that she could go to lectures in peace. In short, as they say, nothing was a sign of trouble. Cynthia was silent. And what's next? Ben encouraged her. You tell me. And then she said, my daughter was 2 years old. That's when Daddy came in, so happy and joyful, and said, I think I've met my love, Cynthia. I, of course, was overjoyed. My daddy was such an interesting man. So many women looked up to him. But all he had on his mind was work, and me and the baby. But when I saw her, I thought that he had met such a woman, probably middle-aged or maybe even older, smart, intelligent, beautiful. And not because I wanted such a wife for him, but because he always liked such women. He even had an affair with one such woman. They dated for a long time, maybe 4 years. She was an art historian. She told me very interesting things about her work, and I was friends with her, you could say. I hoped in my heart that one day she and Daddy would get married. He offered to marry her, by the way, but she didn't really want to. And then she went to Japan. There she was offered some fancy job she'd always dreamed of. Dad was worried, of course, but then he calmed down. And then he announced his new romance to me. He said that today his beloved will come to visit us and get acquainted with me and the baby. I was very excited. After all, a normal, healthy man should live a full life. He should have a woman whom he will make happy, who will give him happiness. But I was in for a real shock. I was expecting anything but that. I think even if he'd met someone older than him, I wouldn't have been so surprised. It's love. What can you do about it? And here comes some girl a year younger than me. It's weird when the wife is younger than the daughter. She is for him. But I thought he was supposed to see her as a child. And she was vulgar and giggled like a silly little girl. Then she sits in a chair, puts her feet up on the coffee table and looks round. And then she said, yes, it's a nice house you have. It's just a pity it's not big enough. She was talking about the 2-story mansion. She thought it was too small. I couldn't say a word out of amazement, but she continued, we're going to have children with our kitty, so we need to make a nursery. She immediately switched to you with me without asking. Come on, think about where you're going to move to. You're a grown-up girl. And me and my kitty have a young family. We'll have kids. Where else are you going to live here? And I listened, and I didn't recognize my dad. I thought he'd stop her from bossing her around, but he just looked at her and smiled. And suddenly he seemed so old, so pathetic. It was the first time I ever thought of my father that way. I suppose it was the contrast with this young silly girl who'd taken charge of someone else's house. And he catches every word she says. It's embarrassing. When I couldn't stand it any longer and told her that we were not going to move from here, and my father is very happy that my granddaughter and I live here, I thought at least here he would support me. But no, he still smiles and doesn't say a word. And only when I went to the kitchen, he came in next, took my hand and quietly asked, don't do that to the girl, Cynthia. She might take offense. I wanted to ask him if he thought I might take offense, but he had that pleading look in his eye. So I decided, okay, I'll shut up and we'll talk afterwards. I went back to the room and listened silently for an hour to her ravings that she was the heiress of an ancient noble family, that in her childhood she had a French governess, and in general she was an aristocrat of blue blood. True, the Frenchwoman did not somehow teach her elementary manners, but Papa didn't seem to notice. That was how we met. In the evening, after her long-awaited departure, I put the baby to bed and went to talk to her father. I looked into his room and saw him sitting on the sofa holding a woman's glove, smoothing it out, spreading it out. He saw me, smiled and said, well, Isabella forgot it, so she'll be back, and I felt so sorry for him. I can't stand it. I wish I could tell him so in love, what I thought of that aristocrat of his. But my father was a perceptive man. He understood everything. I can see everything myself, Cynthia. Don't you worry. But I'm not out of my mind yet. I know she likes to lie, and she doesn't like me, I told him. Dad, how can you not see who you've brought into the house? All she wants is your money. And you're thinking of marrying her. And he smiled sadly at me and said, I can see it, Cynthia, but I can't do anything about it. I don't see her for a day, and I can't get enough of her. I can't sleep. And he pointed to his heart. And I can't say a word against her, he goes on, because as soon as I think that she will be offended and leave me, I feel that there is nothing more to live for. Don't judge me, my daughter. I must have fallen in love in my old age. When I was a boy, I never fell in love as much as I do now. I just hugged him. I felt sorry for him and scared for him. I said, well, if you need her, so what? And that's how he married this person, brought her into the house. And I realized that maybe it would be better for me and my daughter to really move away. So I took a correspondence course, got a job here. I managed to rent a room in a family hostel. The neighbors are quiet, peaceful. My dad didn't want to let me go. He wondered why I'd packed my things. After all, the house is big. There's enough room for everyone. But I told him I was moving in with my boyfriend. I lied, of course. But what else was I supposed to say? That his beautiful girlfriend was going through my stuff. She'd try on a shirt or my favorite dress. Once I told her about it, so she immediately began to flap her eyes and ran to complain to my husband that, say, your daughter offends me and wants to get out of the house. In general, we began to live separately with the baby and let the newlyweds do as they please. But then my father fell ill and complained to me that his heart was throbbing and he became tired quickly. He often lay down all day and had no strength to get up. The doctors couldn't find anything. And after a while, it was just like yours, so was his. And then I went to the morgue to pick up his clothes and take them to the one they buried him in. And I found the exact same needle behind the lapel of his jacket. I kept looking at it and wondering where it came from. But my neighbor in the dormitory enlightened me. She had just come in to ask for something and saw me with this jacket and needle. The neighbor has an aunt in the village. She knows some magical things there. A needle like this, if you speak it properly, it's a deadly spoil. I went to my neighbor, an aunt, after I buried my father. She told me a lot of things about this girl. She even described her. Dad lived because he could not resist her will, so he did not live, but suffered. He knew what she was like in his mind, but he couldn't live without her. And what? And she put this needle to his death too. She didn't talk to him herself. Someone else did, but at her will. It's a pity I learned about it too late. By the way, the widow wasn't sad for a minute. Why should she? She didn't love him, and she made him rewrite his will. Everything went to her. What's there to be sad about? A will can be contested, Ben pointed out. No, I shook my head. I'll be honest with you, I don't even want to bother with it. I've got a daughter. What if that thing uses any more magic? I understand. Ben nodded. I can understand that after today, but let me try. I'm a lawyer. I have a law office. And without false modesty, one of the best in the country. You know, magic is magic, but the law is not the last resort. I promise neither you nor your daughter will ever see this lady again. And, of course, I'll warn my people too. I don't know, go to a psychic for some kind of protection to put themselves. Will you allow me to intervene? Cynthia smiled. I can't even pay you. Do you really think that on a dishwasher's wages? No money, he interrupted firmly. Consider that I got involved in this case out of love of justice, especially since I owe you one. Now to business. First question, what's the bastard's name? Julia Swan, I believe it is. Mrs. Julia Swan. Julia Swan, echoed Ben and smiled enigmatically. Wow, that's interesting. She's above average height, with short black hair. Is that right? Well, yes, have you met her? I have, he answered evasively. In fact, it was embarrassing to tell when and under what circumstances he had met her. Julia had turned up at work one day. It was back in the days when Mary had been his secretary. Ben was going to fly to another city on business that day. The flight was canceled, so he came back to the office. As it turned out, it was very untimely, because Mary, who hadn't worked a week yet, got drunk with her girlfriend right at the workplace. The first thing Ben saw when he entered the reception area was Julia climbing up on the secretary's desk and doing some wild dance, a mixture of lambada and some shamanic dances. Mary, with her back to him, was keenly filming the action on her phone while encouraging her friend with loud shouts. Sorry to interrupt, ladies, Ben said nonchalantly. As if on cue, the girls turned in his direction. Julia clumsily got off the table and smiled. Yes, it's us, but just a little. On the occasion of the holiday, it's my birthday today. Congratulations, Mary nodded. I'm warning you for the first and last time, if it happens again. Never, she vowed. And then he had to drive two very drunk ladies home. And Julia, the same Julia Swan, lived further away than Mary, so he drove her home last and never told anyone that Julia was screaming in a drunken hysteria. What the hell do you want with this characterless person? Are you talking about your friend? He asked ironically. She works for me. Oh, come on. You know what she's made of. And as if I hadn't noticed the way you look at her. Yeah, she's all blonde, legs, figure. Oh man, I thought you were smarter than that. She's a stupid, characterless, dumb, brainless, crazy, joyless woman. I think Ben smiled. You used too many words with a prefix without and too much alcohol. Forgive my impertinence. Impertinence, Julia rejoiced. She seemed to have missed everything but the word she liked. I like boldness, and you need a real woman. Bold, bright, daring like me. Even if my legs are shorter than hers or my waist is wider. I'll show you everything. You'll see for yourself. She began to unbutton her dress in a hurry and awkwardly. Calm down, Ben shouted at her. Calm down and behave yourself. If you keep stripping, you'll go home naked right now. I bet you'll gather an army of admirers of your ethereal beauty. She's got some nerve. It worked, strangely enough. Julia took offense and sat quiet as a mouse the rest of the way. That was all she had to do. Mary came to work the next day exhausted and guilty. "Mr. Ben," she said as soon as she saw her boss, "I'm so embarrassed, so ashamed of yesterday." "Me too," he almost said. "I'm ashamed of you, and especially of your friend, most of all for myself, for having seen and heard it all." But looking into the pale face of the secretary, he did not dare to say it. It was a pity to kill the girl. She was already, by all appearances, worried. "Go to work," he said. Returning from lunch break, he bought Mary a mineral water, and the next day he proposed to go to lunch together. He didn't know why, and then he realized that he had been touched by her sincere remorse, her embarrassment, and the way she had apologized without trying to put the blame on her friend, who, by the way, was far from easy. Mary seemed to him a very lively, sincere person who, though stumbling, makes mistakes, but is not afraid to admit them. "How wrong I was," he said in a low voice. What she asked, not hearing him. "I'm just saying." A few months passed, and life changed again. Ben had kept his word. Now half of the found father's inheritance belonged to his daughter, and with the other half, Ben asked Julia to meet him at the cafe. And no one knew what they talked about, but afterwards Julia renounced her part of the inheritance in favor of the daughter and granddaughter of her late husband. She herself left town that evening without telling anyone where she was going. But who was she to tell? Apart from Mary, she had no friends. And at the same time Mary was jolting on the train back to her starting point. Ahead was her home village. Her father had passed away, and she now had her own inherited village home. Of course, it wasn't what she had dreamed of, but it was better than nothing at all. She never settled in the city. And after she and Ben broke up, she was in a bad place. Mary couldn't get a decent job. She was rejected even at the probationary stage, and strangely enough, men stopped paying attention to her, who was used to admiring glances. At first, Mary thought she just didn't look good because of her failures. But as time went on, nothing changed. Now she hoped that she would be able to get some sleep and recover after living in the village. After all, it was the only thing she could hope for. She didn't have the money to go to a beautician anyway. Cynthia, entering her late father's house as a hostess, stopped in the middle of the room. "How things have changed here," she said quietly. Ben nodded understandingly, taking a quick look around. There were posters of celebrities on the walls and bright pink sofas and armchairs. "I see," Ben said. "Julia's hand is clearly here. She must have redecorated it to her own taste." Cynthia grinned. "That's right. My father wouldn't have thought of it." Ben came closer and took her hand. "You're the boss now," he reminded her, "and you can throw it all away today, and then you can put it back the way you want it." "I don't see how I'm going to live here," she admitted. "As long as it's all," she looked at the pink furniture with disgust. "We'll be here. I can't even imagine. I don't think I'll be able to sleep until all this mess is out of here." "That's another thing," he said, pleased. "It's nothing. Let's go to the restaurant, and I'll call the movers, and they'll remove everything that annoys you so much, and then it'll be a breeze. I suggest we pick a room for Chloe first and furnish it. It'll give us one cozy corner of the house. So, shall I call the movers?" "Call them," Cynthia agreed. Ben had always been very easy for her, and not just because he was ready to help her with any problem. It was just that he understood her quickly, correctly, without any unnecessary words, just like her father used to. And 10 minutes after the movers arrived, the living room, as if by magic, was cleared of tasteless furnishings, and even seemed to increase in size. There Cynthia sighed. "It's better now. At least it's not disgusting to be here." "We were going to the restaurant," Ben reminded her. "Have you changed your mind yet?" "No, I've got something better in mind," she smiled slyly. "Let's order delivery and eat here. It'll be my first dinner at home in years, and, it's suddenly very important to me. Even though the room is empty, and everything here needs to be redecorated. But still." "Whatever you say." Ben didn't argue. What was there to argue about? He understood her and sincerely rejoiced that he managed to get justice for her and Chloe after all. It was his victory, and he also has the right to celebrate. And whether in a restaurant, whether here, a matter of tenth. He generally began to attach much less importance to conventions. Take Mary, he knew they had nothing in common, that she'd never really be close to him. But he almost married her. Why? Why? He's a rich man. He's in the big business. He's supposed to be married to a very beautiful woman. Why should he be? It doesn't matter. The main thing is that everybody does it. And it's like he has to do it too. He almost paid with his life for those conventions. Did he ever love Mary? No, not for a day. He was infatuated for a while. That's true. He cared for her. He gave her gifts. But he didn't love her and forgot about her as soon as she was out of his life. And to tell the truth, he wasn't at all interested in where she was now, this Mary, and what she was doing. Had she found a new fiancé? It was also unimportant. It was as if she had never existed. Of course, he kept these reflections to himself. There was no point in discussing them. Though Cynthia had sympathized with him a couple of times, more out of politeness, of course. Ben nodded absent-mindedly in response, and turned the conversation to another topic. He didn't want to talk about it. He was also very afraid of scaring Cynthia away. She was so light now, so light, like a bird. She would flap her beautiful wings and fly away from him, and he mustn't let her go. Ben was sure that he had never before met a woman so sincere, so understanding, and so worthy of respect as Cynthia, and he kept wanting to say so, but there was never the right moment. First he had to get her inheritance. Then he'd have to talk to Julia. Ben hoped with all his heart that the widow would never forget that conversation. And besides, Cynthia's graduation defense was coming up, and she shouldn't be distracted from something so important. And then there's the moving and the renovations. I'll be sure to tell her, he promised himself, after she defended. Right after that, there was peace and quiet joy in his soul. He would tell her everything. He would tell her, and then, he's not stupid. He can see that she likes him, and it means that they will be together. They will love each other. They will raise Chloe, and then they will have a child together, maybe more than one. It's all going to happen. A rich man sheltered a shivering beggar, and when at night he heard the melody of a lullaby. "Daddy, I got first place," said Mealy. Andrew smiled. It was his daughter. For 15 years of her life, she had given her father many reasons to be proud of herself. And now the girl called her parent to inform about another victory. She was in New York on another Olympiad for young programmers. Mealy went there as part of a group from the Center for Gifted Children, where she had been studying for 4 years. "My smart girl, congratulations," said the man. "I owe you a present." "I'm so glad." Mealy's voice trembled with excitement. This contest was very important to her. It had been about 5 years since Mealy had decided on her profession. She would be a programmer and would definitely go to Stanford to study. There are so many opportunities for young professionals there, not like in their provincial town. Mealy was already getting crowded. But to get into such a prestigious university, you need to win national and international competitions. So Mealy was doing her best. "Rest now," encouraged his daughter Andrew. "Walk around New York, since you are in such a beautiful city. But be careful there." "Yes, Daddy, of course. I love you." Mealy pressed the reset button. A short beep sounded in the phone. Andrew smiled again. Mealy is so smart, intelligent, sensible, far more savvy than he is. At her age, her daughter will achieve a lot. Oh my. And some 9 or 10 years ago, Andrew was looking for information about schools for children with mental retardation. Everything was going to give her to the first grade of the correctional institution, in a normal school, and certainly in the gymnasium or lyceum would not take her, because in his 6 years the girl did not speak a word, mooing. Sometimes she explained something with gestures if she needed something urgently, but this rarely happened. Most often the daughter was in her own thoughts, sitting on the windowsill in the nursery. It was her favorite place, looking out the window and thinking about something. Mealy hardly smiled at that time. Andrew did not immediately notice that something was wrong with his daughter. He was too busy with his own grief. And Mealy? Well, what could Mealy understand then? She was only 2 years old. She probably didn't even remember Leanie, her mother. That's what Andrew thought. But the disappearance of her mother from the life of a 2-year-old baby still caused a serious trauma to the little girl. It turned out later. The consequences were catastrophic. Every time Mealy achieved another success, Andrew rejoiced and saddened at the same time. Rejoiced. It is understandable why. Sadness, on the other hand, was due to Leanie not seeing it all. She would have been happy to know that her favorite, long-awaited daughter was growing up to be such a smart girl. But that's just the way it turned out. Andrew grew up in a wealthy family and was an only child. Moreover, even at the grandparents, he turned out to be the only grandchild. It is not difficult to assume that from an early age Andrew bathed in love, recognition, and attention of loved ones. He had everything he needed for happiness: beautiful clothes, expensive toys. He was taken to expensive resorts. Delicious pancakes and fragrant pies were prepared for him on demand. Andrew received detailed answers to all his questions and at any time could play with one of his relatives, for example, in board or mobile games. He was never refused. His relatives adored Andrew, and he reciprocated them. It is a blessing to have such a strong, friendly family, where everyone is ready to support the other in any situation. When Andrew became older, he had to study a lot in a prestigious private school. A lot of lessons were assigned, and additionally the boy was engaged in several sections: swimming, boxing, financial literacy, business school, all because he was to become the heir to the family business. So parents called the network of pizzerias, the owners of which were. Business steadily brought good profits and grew, developed. Even branches in other cities opened. Andrew, since childhood, delved into the wisdom of family business. His father often took him with him to the office, showed his very young son financial documents. In general, his father was actively preparing his replacement. "There's not much that can happen to me. You must be ready at any moment to be at the helm," he said. However, immediately added, "But I hope, of course, for a long time to remain a leader. And in any case, I need a worthy assistant. Very soon you will become my right hand." Andrew didn't mind. He liked his father's business, liked to get into the nuances of his business. And the young guy sometimes had quite worthwhile ideas, which his father praised very much and put into practice. Andrew was a great pleasure to see the eyes of his parents light up with pride for his only son. Then Andrew went to study in Moscow, entered the economics department of a prestigious university. Not entirely independently, his father connected some of his connections, but Andrew studied completely independently and was one of the best students of the course. Metropolitan life fascinated the guy. It was bright, rich, diverse, full of adventures and new acquaintances. But Moscow was also tiring as a metropolis. It's good to come here to have fun, to get new impressions. But it's also great to study here, of course. Where else to find such a cluster of talented teachers, theoreticians, and practitioners who have achieved dizzying success? Thought Andrew. But by the last course he realized that his destiny life in his native small town. In Yumatov, quiet, calm, cozy. There is no such a rush there. The road to the office takes a maximum of 20 minutes, and that's if you get into a traffic jam. And in general, there is a special atmosphere in my hometown. It gives me strength and confidence. In general, Andrew himself decided to return to Yumatov. All the more his father needed a right hand. But he knew that if he wanted to stay in Moscow, his parents would not have pressured and did not oppose. They would have supported their son in any case. And it's just wonderful to have such a reliable rear behind him. Andrew came to Yumatov and got to work. Together with his father, they thought over a new project, the opening of a Japanese restaurant. This business was to become a new step in the development of the family business. Prospects were pleasing, plans were inspiring. It seemed that a cloudless future was ahead. In the end, everything with the restaurant of Japanese cuisine turned out, but not immediately, but after almost 5 years. For a while, the project had to be forgotten, as important events began to happen one after another in Andrei's life. And then later, this restaurant practically saved a man's life, distracted him, shifted his attention, and helped him get away from destructive thoughts. But that was later. Anyway, one fine December day, Andrei decided that it was time for him to unwind. He called his former classmate Alexei, and the friends went to the skating rink, just like in the good old days. The skating rink was large, located on the central square of the city. The music was playing loudly, and people of all ages and builds were sliding smoothly on the ice. Snow was falling from the sky in large flakes. In the center of the rink stood a 3-meter-tall Christmas tree. Soon New Year's Eve, Andrei's favorite holiday since childhood. Until now, his parents made him a sweet gift, collected in a beautiful package with Santa Claus' favorite candies of their already 25-year-old son. Andrei was sincerely pleased with this surprise every time. He felt so warm at heart, and memories of his happy childhood came back to his mind at once. Andrei was confident on skates. In childhood, he and Alexei managed to go to the hockey section for 2 years. Then both of them had no time for sports. They started serious studies, but their skills haven't gone anywhere. Here he is, Alexei already at the other end of the rink with girls trying to get acquainted. Andrei grinned. Yes, his buddy will not miss a single beauty. Such a guy won't be missed anywhere. Andrei looked at his friend and therefore probably did not immediately notice her, a girl in a white down jacket and light jeans, so fragile, almost transparent. And he, a big guy, ran at her and of course knocked her down. Ouch. The young people exclaimed at the same time. Andrei suddenly felt his cheeks flooding with paint. He had pushed a man. The guy hastily gave the stranger his hand, helping her up. "Sorry, please, it's my fault." "Are you hurt?" he babbled, looking into her marvelous blue eyes. "No, I'm all right." The girl waved her hand. "I was looking around and didn't notice you driving." Andrew could not believe his ears. She apologized. Miracles and only. It would be more logical to hear outraged exclamations from the girl. I'm sorry, I've only recently gotten on skates. Anyway, I don't know how to skate. That's why I'm bumping into everyone. But instead, Evie said, I'm the one who hit you. Andrew looked into the girl's wide-open blue eyes and realized that he did not want to let go of her hand. Although the interlocutor has long stood firmly on her feet, and in his help obviously no longer needed, long brown strands of hair stood out from under her white down jacket. The girl's cheeks were bright pink from the frost. She looked so beautiful, so young, so touching, that the boy couldn't take his eyes off her. Maybe if you don't mind, I could give you a lesson. Teach you how to skate. You'd better stay on the ice, Andrew suggested. That would be great. I never dreamed of having a personal trainer. But that's exactly what I need today, Evie smiled. That's how Andrew met his future wife. Only then, of course, he did not know about it yet. He didn't even think about it, just enjoyed talking to a beautiful girl. Looking like snow maidens in their white jackets, they took a long ride. Matthew had long since left the rink. Andrew and Evie still didn't want to part. They talked about all sorts of things that day, as if they had known each other for 100 years. Andrew was surprised at how much they coincided in everything. Of course, the young people exchanged phone numbers and started dating. Andrew knew about his father's plans for his personal life. The parent wanted his son to marry Mealy, the daughter of a local entrepreneur and business partner. Then the financial gatekeepers would merge their empires into something grand. Mealy was quite a nice girl. The same age as Andrew, serious, career-oriented. She was also preparing to become her father's right-hand woman. Andrew was even initially not against becoming her spouse. Why not? A worthy option. But meeting Evie put an end to all those plans. Evie was from a middle-class or even poor family. It was a fine line. Evie lived with her parents and 2 younger brothers in a 2-room apartment. They didn't starve. They didn't wear rags. Evie had even graduated from the local university. But the family couldn't afford much. For example, they never traveled or dined in restaurants. That is, the financial levels of Evie and Andrew were very different. The girl was a little embarrassed by this, but the guy didn't care. He dreamed of showing Evie the whole world, to make her life bright, happy, and carefree. Andrew truly fell in love and felt that it was mutual. The guy realized that his parents would not be thrilled with this choice. At first, they warned him so many times about girls who dreamed of hooking a boy from a wealthy family, mercantile ladies who planned to move into a beautiful life on the hump of a man in love with them. Andrew knew that such really existed, even met him more than once. But the intentions of such pirate girls were obvious, no matter how much they tried to hide it. And Evie? She was different. Andrew was sure that his mother and father, having gotten to know Evie better, would understand everything and accept his son's choice. And even if not, Andrew was almost indifferent to the opinion of his parents, just to be near his beloved, to see her deep blue eyes, hear her gentle voice and feel how she puts her head on his shoulder. This gesture, for some reason, was particularly endearing to the guy. And so it came to pass. Evie was very afraid to meet Andrew's parents, but it was impossible to postpone. The guy proposed to his beloved, she agreed. No matter how it went, she'd have to meet her new in-laws. The acquaintance went just fine. As Andrew expected, the charming bride won the hearts of his mother and father. It could not be otherwise. Andrew, of course, met with the parents of his future wife and was surprised to note that Evie's father clearly abused alcohol. It was noticeable in his eyes, skin color, trembling hands. The girl's mother looked pale and exhausted. Apparently, she had to carry her entire family on her own. Andrew then sincerely felt sorry for her. Kira did not tell Andrew about his father before, apparently embarrassed. But did she think that his attitude to her because of this will change? How could Kira assume such a thing? In general, having seen in what conditions live his beloved, Andrew even stronger strengthened in the decision to quickly take her away from there, in a new life. Then there was a wedding, lavish, loud, cheerful. Kira, in her wedding dress, resembled a fairy tale princess. Andrew could not take his eyes off her, and he was not the only one. The bride received many compliments from all the guests. True, Kira did not know how to accept them at all. very embarrassed, although she was pleased. Andrew and Kira began to live in the apartment of her husband. The guy has long since settled in his own home, to his parents came only to visit. Those were wonderful days. Kira was getting used to a new home, to a new life. The newlyweds were learning how to live together. Adult relatives warned that the process of lapping usually does not go as smoothly as we would like. Inevitable conflicts, disputes, quarrels. But in the case of Kira and Andrew, nothing of the kind happened. Young spouses, as if they were created for each other. Andrew every day mentally thanked fate for the fact that she brought him together with Kira. He could not believe that they are so coincidental. They like the same movies and books, the same look at things, even phrases for each other sometimes finish. Kira worked as a notary's assistant in a local office, and Andrew developed a business with his father. Love, mutual understanding, a house full of cups. It seemed that only cloudless happiness awaited the newlyweds ahead. And so it was for some time, about a year after the wedding. Kira informed her husband that she was expecting a child. The joy of the future father had no limit. They had already been planning a baby for 6 months, but it did not work out in any way. The newlyweds were going to the doctors, waiting for Kira's vacation, tuning in for a long, systematic search for the problem. And here it is, happiness. Everything worked out by itself. Pregnancy was not very easy. Kira was constantly nauseated. She went to the hospital every now and then. Closer to the birth, Kira was diagnosed with heart problems. It seemed as if they had not been there before, or they did not manifest themselves. And then the body, coping with the increased load, suddenly gave failure. Andrew's parents found the best doctors for Kira. She was constantly under observation. Andrew was painful to see his beloved in such a state, and from fear for her, he anxiously clenched his heart. Fortunately, everything went safely. In due time, Kira gave birth to a healthy, strong girl. At the family council, it was decided to name the baby girl Evie. Andrew was happy everything was fine with the child. Kira was also on the mend after childbirth, and the recovery of the young mother's body was in full swing, as evidenced by numerous examinations. Kira quickly recovered and happily plunged into taking care of her daughter. Andrew also did not stay aside, tried to fully enjoy the infancy of his long-awaited child. The man realized that the second baby in their family will not be. Doctors made it clear that Kira contraindicated pregnancy and childbirth. She barely survived this time, too. According to the cardiologist, the young woman was just lucky. Andrew was not ready to risk the most expensive thing he has in his life. And one child is enough for them. He is also in the family alone. Evie turned out to be exactly as it should: healthy, smart, cheerful, agile, and quick. As soon as the daughter began to walk, immediately learned to climb into the most unexpected places, then in the closet with clothes her parents found her, or in the toy box. You need to keep an eye on such a prankster. Evie immediately became a favorite of numerous relatives, parents, grandparents. Adults did not want to soul in the girl, often visited her, gave gifts. Andrew's mother was especially pleased with her granddaughter. Finally, there is for whom to buy dresses. And that all these shorts and sneakers are boring already. Sooner the girl's hair would grow back. I want to braid her pigtails. A year and a half passed. Evie was already starting to talk. Kira devoted all her time to her daughter, singing her songs, telling her poems, practicing finger games and gymnastics with the little girl. And the results were evident. The girl in her year and a half quite clearly spoke in sentences, of course, with a childish accent, but adults understood her perfectly. Andrew's heart clenched with tenderness when his little girl addressed him. The word, this miraculously fragile creature with a height of just over 80 centimeters, made him stronger. The man felt that for the sake of his daughter and wife, he could roll mountains. They were so happy. But at least it seemed so to Andrew. However, Kira once very surprised him, saying that she is happy, of course, but still not quite. It turned out that Kira had dreamed of having another child. Evie has grown up, and looking at the little girl, I regret that the girl will have to grow up alone. You see, I have 2 brothers after all. It's so great. We were never bored. We ran everywhere together, played, talked a lot about everything, stood for each other. But the girl is all alone. That's not good. But I too grew up alone in the family, Andrew objected with a smile. And I had quite a happy childhood. You just don't know what you were deprived of. Kira shook her head and sighed sadly. Andrew felt uneasy. He didn't like this talk. You know it's dangerous for you to give birth again. Remember how hard Evie was on us. You were on the brink so many times. But we didn't know then, and now we do, and we realize it's very dangerous. We've had enough of Evie. That's exactly what we know, Kira exclaimed. And that's why we're going to make a bed. I'll see a cardiologist, I'll take all the right medications. And I'll prepare for pregnancy. I'm already taking the right vitamins. I've read a lot about these cases. If you keep everything under control, the risk is minimal. Kira dreamed of having another child. But Andrew was adamant. They even had their first fight over it. His wife convinced him that everything will be fine. You just need to follow the prescriptions of doctors, constantly observed by specialists, and she is ready for this for the sake of the second baby. However, the man could not risk Kira's life. Of course, he wanted a big family, several children, but not at such a cost. To test fate again, given their recent experience, was foolish. And yet it happened. On a sunny July morning, Kira informed Andrew that they would have a second baby boy. The man was truly terrified then. He probably even turned pale. "What's wrong with you? Everything will be fine." You'll see. Kira laughed and put her hand on his shoulder. Andrew only shook his head. He knew, felt that nothing was going to be okay anymore. The pregnancy, oddly enough, was going much easier than the first time. Kira was feeling good, taking lots of walks. She followed all the doctor's recommendations and was examined very often. She literally never left the hospital, although her condition was quite bearable. Everything seemed to be in order, but on the soul of Andrew was uneasy. And for good reason. It happened at night. Suddenly nothing foretold trouble. Andrew woke up from the quiet sounds. Kira was sick, so bad that she couldn't even call for help. Kira was suffocating. Andrew jumped up, turned on the light, and was horrified. He had never seen his wife in such a state. So pale. Black circles under her eyes like a dead man's white skin. Kira's dried lips glistened with sweat. Her chest heaved. The woman was short of breath. Andrew grabbed the phone in a panic and called an ambulance. Then he called his mother to have her and his father come over and sit with Evie. The baby was sleeping sweetly in her princess room and didn't even realize something scary was going on. Andrew held Kira's cold hand, confessed his love to her, asked her to hold on, and prayed. For the first time in his life, he probably prayed to himself that the doctors would make it in time. It seemed to him that when help arrived, it would be too late. And from this thought, Andrew began to panic. But the doctors were in time. Several uniformed men arrived. They went into the bedroom. Kira took a cardiogram, measured her blood pressure. She was listened to, then injected with something. The woman seemed to feel better. At least she was breathing more freely. Andrew exhaled. Everything would be all right now. His parents came over to babysit Evie, so Andrew calmly followed the ambulance to keep an eye on Kira. The man drove through the night city behind the car, in which at the same time medics were fighting for the life of his wife. They should be able to handle it. They're professionals. It's going to be okay. That's what Andrew convinced himself as he drove along. But reaching the hospital, the man learned the terrible news. Kira was not brought. She was gone right in the ambulance. The doctors did everything they could. Pregnancy, which Andrew was so afraid of, still finished his wife. The child could not be saved either. For a while, the man went into himself. He was not interested in anything, neither business, nor his own health, not even a small daughter. He blamed himself for not changing Kira's mind, not forcing her to have an abortion. Of course, he was to blame for everything that had happened. He should have been a more attentive and sensitive husband. He failed, did not save his happiness. Life without Kira made no sense. They had so many plans, so many joint desires. And now what? Andrew felt sorry for himself. Who else will understand him so much as a spouse? Who will love him so much? But even more, the man was sorry for so suddenly, early cut short the young life of his wife. She had not seen all those corners of the planet, which Andrew promised to show her. Didn't have time to enjoy life properly. Mother and father tried to pull their son out of the abyss of despair. They brought to him psychotherapists and psychologists who conducted soul-saving conversations with the man. Sometimes it did make things easier, but only for a while. Andrew did not understand why he should live on. The worst thing was that he didn't even want to see Evie. The girl misses you, his mother tried to get through to her son. Not only did her mom die, but her father disappeared from her life. Just imagine what it's like for the child. Andrew didn't want to imagine anything. He didn't care. And anyway, what can a little girl who is not even 2 years old understand? Probably has already forgotten in Kira and me. But her mother insisted that Evie was not well. She doesn't talk to anyone else or smile. Remember how giggly our little girl used to be? Now she sits around all day rearranging cubes. It's a terrible sight. No one can get her to move. What if you can do it? Only 6 months after the tragedy, Andrea began to slowly come back to life. Parents, friends, and doctors helped. And of course Evie too. The man started working again. And then just then his father offered him to develop a long-planned project, a restaurant of Japanese cuisine. Andrew gladly seized the opportunity to distract himself for a while. The project is huge, a lot of work. We'll have to work hard to enter the market. That's good. Let his head be filled with familiar things rather than destructive thoughts. That's when the man came to see his daughter for the first time in a long time. Andrew felt guilty in front of the little girl. It was as if he betrayed her, abandoned her, left her to her parents. After all, the mother is right, Evie has experienced a huge tragedy. And even if she does not realize everything as an adult, but at the level of feelings certainly felt it to the full. Kira and Evie were so close. She followed her mother like a tail, even climbing into her crib. At night, she'd lie at her mother's side. They were never apart for more than a couple hours. And then all of a sudden, Andrew hardly recognized his daughter. Of course, he realized that children grow up fast at that age. When the tragedy happened, Evie was barely 2 years old. How hard it is for Andrew to survive such a tragedy, to lose his beloved wife Kira, and to see the state of his little daughter Evie after this grief. And after 6 months, he finally decided to visit his daughter. And she was already 2.5 years old. The look of her blue eyes, so similar to Kira's eyes, was sad and somehow adult, not childishly serious. Evie had really grown quiet and sad. She didn't run, she didn't laugh, she didn't even smile. She used to be such a talkative little girl, a real giggler. Relatives and friends were surprised at how developed she was for her age. And now the girl said nothing at all, only sometimes mooed something under her nose. This discovery alarmed Andre. The mother explained that it was the consequences of stress, that all the doctors examined Evie. Physically, she is healthy. But the doctors don't really believe that she used to talk so well for her years. They say it'll work out, she'll talk again. Many children her age are still silent. Andre was grateful to his parents for taking care of his child. He himself was in no condition to take care of the baby after losing Kira. Eva is very cute. For us it is even enjoy, they said. Andrew went with his head into work on a new restaurant of Japanese cuisine, Yamato. He put all his efforts into the project, trying to achieve the highest quality. The restaurant opened even ahead of schedule, but Andre wanted more. He dreamed of having guests from all over the city, and even the region. With Evie he now saw, but not often. The girl still lived with her grandparents. Andrew plunged into work with his head, trying to distract himself from the heartache. Andrew's mother did a lot with her granddaughter Evie and took her to specialists. She developed the little girl at home as best she could. But there was no result. Evie grew up, but she never spoke. It was painful for Andrew to see his once cheerful little girl in such a state. It seemed she still hadn't recovered from what had happened with Kira. Andrew, of course, was still worried too. He longed for Kira, blamed himself periodically, and despaired over his inability to hug his loved one. But he was older and stronger. Besides, he had a job in Evie. She could not cope with her misfortune, and the specialists, on which her adult relatives were not stingy, were powerless. Andrew, on the advice of doctors, bought a cozy country house with a large yard. On the territory arranged for Evie a whole fairy tale park with fountains, swings, and even her own little castle, and in the backyard for the baby built a pool. Many doctors said that swimming has a beneficial effect on the nervous system of children. So Andrew took it upon himself to teach his daughter to swim. Evie quickly figured out what to do. Now she did not get out of the pool in the summer days and again from side to side like a fish. But that didn't work either. True, she became more athletic and sturdy, which of course is not bad either. But she was still silent and not particularly eager to interact with the world around her. Andrew was now taking care of his daughter on his own. That was his decision. After all, a daughter was his fatherly responsibility and duty. During the day with Evie sat Nanny, because the little girl could not be given to a regular kindergarten, and in the correctional did not want there are children with serious diagnoses and mental retardation. Evie is not like that. She is very smart. She has lively, intelligent eyes. She just doesn't speak yet. But daycare is voluntary. You can take your child if you want, or you can keep her at home. And Evie's 6 years old. School's just around the corner. If it goes on like this, we'll have to send the little girl to a special school for children with special developmental needs. Andrew dreaded the thought of sending Evie to a special school. He knew his daughter was capable of many things. She sees everything, notices and understands everything, but she is silent. She can't go to a remedial school, it would only make things worse. But the doctors made it clear that there was no other way out. If a year of rehabilitation does not yield results, Evie will be enrolled in a special school, because she must be educated anyway. Evie, will you say a word? Andrew begged his daughter. You can, can't you? I know. The girl looked at her father with indifferent eyes and remained silent, and then went to his room, sat on his favorite wide windowsill, hugged his knees with his hands and thought about something known only to her. She could sit like that for hours. That November evening, Andrew stayed late at the office. He warned Evie's nanny and promised to reward her generously for her overtime hours. She didn't mind. I've had a lot of children, the nanny shook her head. But this is the first time I've met such a quiet and unproblematic. It's a pleasure to sit with the girl. You can't see her, you can't hear her. Andrew, of course, was not pleased with such compliments to his daughter. It would be better if Evie, like other children, asked a million questions a minute and methodically trashed the whole house. But no. Sitting on the windowsill, staring off into the distance. If you call her to dinner, she comes, eats, cleans up the dishes. If you don't call her, she won't remember that it's time to eat. And so it is in everything. No initiative, no desires. Except for the pool in the summer months gave the girl some pleasure. And even there, in the warm water, she did not smile. So Andrew left the office late. It was almost 8 o'clock. On the way, the man remembered that Evie's favorite cereal had run out at home. It would be a pity if she didn't get the usual product for breakfast. No, the little girl wouldn't make a scandal, wouldn't get cranky, and certainly wouldn't get hysterical. Evie probably wouldn't give away her disappointment. In that sense, Evie was indeed a trouble-free child. But Andrew wanted to please his daughter, at least in small things. He carefully noticed what Evie liked and tried to bring her positive emotions more often. Andrew parked near a convenience store and got out of the warm interior of the car. It was slushy, dark, and uncomfortable outside on a cold November evening. His face was immediately blasted by the icy wind. The man lifted the collar of his jacket to protect his neck and cheeks from the merciless gusts and walked briskly toward the supermarket doors. The doors obediently slid to the sides, letting the visitor inside. Andrew found himself on the stairs leading upward. It was much warmer here than outside, but the dim bulb under the ceiling gave little light. The entire floor was covered in dirt that the cleaning lady hadn't had time to clean up yet, not a very cozy or pleasant place. The man was about to go up to the store when he noticed a girl in a thin coat that was soaked through. She was sitting behind a column on a high curb that stretched along the wall. Andrew stopped. There was something about the girl's appearance that the man immediately realized she was in trouble and needed help. Long blonde hair, disheveled by the wind, thin hands shivering in the deep pockets of her coat, and her eyes huge eyes of a marvelous turquoise hue. Andrew, it seems, had never seen such confused and sad eyes. It was necessary to approach this stranger, to find out what happened, but Andrew did not want to frighten her. After all, he is a man, and she is a fragile young girl, probably anxious and thinking about him unknowingly. So he walked on by. The supermarket was already sparsely populated. Andrew walked slowly through the rows, throwing Evie's favorite cereal, sausage, cheese, some fruit for himself into his basket. Then he saw a beautiful doll that looked a lot like Evie. Andrew smiled and put the pink box with the rest of his purchases. Maybe this toy would make his silent princess happy just a little. All the while he wondered if that girl would still be there when he left the store. The man hoped that the girl would leave, because otherwise he would have to offer her help. Otherwise his conscience would torment him later. Who knows what her story is? I would not want to get involved in anything. But Andrew's hopes were not realized. The girl sat in the same place, wrapping her arms around her shoulders, trying to stop shivering. Apparently she was frozen to the bone in her thin, soaked coat after the recent downpour with hail. Andrew approached her resolutely and, trying to soften her tone as much as possible, asked, "Are you all right?" The girl raised her amazing eyes at him, in which clearly read surprise. But she smiled a very beautiful, sincere, and kind smile. "Yes, of course it's all right." "I think you're not telling the truth," Andrew also smiled and replied. "You see, when people are fine, they don't sit alone in the supermarket, shivering from the cold. Maybe you should call a cab. You obviously need to get home, get warm." "No, I don't have a home. I don't have a home," she admitted with her head down. "How?" Andrew was surprised. She didn't look homeless in any way. She looked well-groomed and not badly dressed. "It's a long story. But everything will be fine with me. I'll think of something now," she assured. After such an admission, Andrew couldn't just walk away. He sat down next to her on the curb and looked into her eyes. "Tell me, I have a lot of time, so I would love to hear your very long story." Andrew felt sorry for this young girl. What if someday his Evie would find herself in a difficult situation? She will need help, and people will pass by indifferently. After all, this girl is someone's daughter, too. Here's what a stranger who identified herself as Stacy told me. "I grew up in a village in a large family. When I was 10 years old, my father died on a construction site, and our family fell on hard times. The head of the family used to provide for us. By village standards, we lived very well, a full cup, our own household. My mother didn't work. She took care of the house and the children. There were 5 of us. I was the eldest. A vegetable garden, chickens, 2 cows, a goat, there was enough to do. And then Mom was left alone with us. At first, it seemed that the family would manage to stay afloat. But soon it became clear nothing would work. There was a catastrophic lack of money. We had to sell livestock, but the proceeds were not enough for long. Mom tried to work, but for some reason she didn't stay anywhere for long. And in the village there was not enough suitable vacancies. And so my mother started to take to the bottle. Apparently, when she got drunk, she forgot about the loss of her loved one, moneylessness, lack of work, and need. We children were left to our own devices. The house was always dirty and uncomfortable now. I, as the eldest, tried to keep order and bring up my younger brothers and sisters. But I was just a child myself. Looking at what was happening, I firmly decided that I didn't want to live like that. I will definitely have a different fate. While my brothers and sisters rejoiced in the freedom that no one controls, does not force to clean or do homework, I studied. I realized that in order to make it in the world, you have to get an education, and for that you have to sweat. I was praised at school, set as an example to my classmates, and there was a reason for that. Everyone knew the conditions in which I lived. And yet I managed to always look clean, tidy, and study only for A's. Toward the end of 9th grade, Stacy decided on her future profession. She decided to become a teacher. The girl was good at getting along with children, especially with little ones. She taught all her younger brothers and sisters to read and write, although they resisted at first. But Stacy managed to find an approach to each one. She also enjoyed watching the children of her neighbors, and not just to make sure that they did not climb anywhere, and taught them useful things: toddlers, colors and shapes, and older letters and numbers. The parents of the children were delighted with the results and paid the clever girl with food and sweets. Everyone said that she would make a wonderful teacher. In fact, the adults encouraged Stacy to think about her future profession. Time flew by, and now Stacy received her high school diploma with only A's. Her teachers helped her apply to teacher training college and helped her get a dormitory. There was no hope for Stacy's mother in this regard. She had lost her way, turning into a likeness of herself. It was obvious to everyone that there was nothing to be done. The younger children had been placed in an orphanage. It was simply too dangerous for them to stay with such a mother. Stacy had at least looked after them, but the girl had to study. She felt sorry for the younger ones, but she realized that they would be better off in the orphanage, where they would at least be fed and sent to school. And what awaited the children at home? hunger, cold, and dirt. Stacy's life began anew. She took to her studies with gusto, used to studying, learning new things, becoming smarter and more experienced. Soon she became the best student of her course and was held up as an example to her classmates. In the course of her studies, Stacy realized that she liked working with difficult children. It's easy to work with ordinary children, but kids with special needs are more interesting, and the results are very satisfying. That's why Stacy specifically asked for an internship at a remedial school. There she immediately found out that she can find an approach even to the most difficult children. She was in contact with children with very serious diagnoses to which even experienced specialists could not reach. "You have a gift, no other way," wondered the head of the school. Stacy smiled embarrassedly. She had been modest and shy since she was a child. After graduating from college, Stacy was immediately hired at the very school where she was interning. The salary was small, but it was enough money for food and a tiny apartment on the outskirts of the city. Her own place, albeit modest. By then, Stacy's sisters had graduated from the orphanage. One became a seamstress, the other a pastry chef. Both soon married well, and their husbands were from out of town. Of course, they took their wives with them. Stacy was happy for her sisters, and a little surprised that they were younger than she was. Very young, almost children, but already married ladies. Now she could not worry about them, their destinies would work out well. True, they will not see each other often, they are separated by thousands of kilometers. But this is not the main thing, the sisters have husbands, education, work. Stacy's two younger brothers were adopted by a couple of Hiddings, bright red-haired twins with blue eyes. The boys came to the orphanage as toddlers, just 8 years old. Handsome, bright, smiling, they were quickly taken in by a family from the city. Stacy didn't know where her brothers were now. Adoption was a secret. But in the orphanage she was told that the new parents very good, wealthy people. So the brothers' fate was safe too. Stacy's mother had a tragic story during her college years. During another drinking party, which her mother regularly organized in her empty house, one of the guests fell asleep with a lit cigarette. The wooden building burst into flames like a torch. Some of the guests managed to escape the burning building, but the mother and several others did not escape. Perhaps they were sound asleep and did not notice anything. It is scary to think what would have happened to the siblings if they had not been in the orphanage. So by her 20s, Stacy was pretty much alone in the world. Her mother was gone. Brothers and sisters moved to different corners of the vast country. Not even her own home was left. But Stacy was not discouraged. She had a desirable profession, a favorite job. It was hard, of course, alone, but she could cope. She had her whole life ahead of her. She'd meet her love, and she'd have children. And their apartment will be big and cozy. Stacy would never repeat her mother's fate. And that's how the young girl lived in a rented apartment. She worked, went to movies and attractions with her friends, educated herself, read a lot of additional literature on the education of special children. And then, perhaps, age took its toll. One day Stacy realized that she couldn't and didn't want to be alone anymore. She needed someone near and dear to her who would take care of her, and she would take care of him too. How great it is to fall asleep and wake up next to a loved one, to talk with him on a variety of topics, to support each other, to make plans for the future. Would Max have made such an impression on Stacy if he had met her at another time? Perhaps the girl fell in love with him so sincerely and wholeheartedly only because she was already ready to fall in love, waiting for it. And then the right person came along. Stacy thought about it later, but she'd never thought about it when she'd met Max. She was on her way back from a friend's birthday party. It was evening. Stacy was in a good mood. They'd had a good time, laughed a lot. The girls went to the club to continue the party. Stacy refused. She didn't like those places. Noisy, crowded, cramped. And she didn't have much money left. She'd just have to make it to her next paycheck. Stacy had 2 important appliances out of order this month, a hairdryer and an electric kettle. Unforeseen expenses. Stacy looked lovely that night, knew it. A flowing, beautiful, slim-fitting sundress, loose hair, light makeup. The proof of the girl's attractiveness was the stares she felt on her. It was pleasant, though a little embarrassing. "Girl, you are so beautiful. Can I meet you?" A voice came from the side. Stacy turned around and met Matthew's eyes. She didn't know it was Matthew at the time, of course. she saw a wonderful guy in front of her. Kind, open face, open eyes of a beautiful hazel hue. There was a lot in them, a light, an interest, and admiration. You could drown in those eyes. "So you don't mind if I walk beside you for a while?" The boy looked at Stacy questioningly. No, the girl smiled. She really wanted this stranger to walk her home. But at the same time, Stacy was embarrassed by her own desire. Fine, the escort dispelled. They walked through the park. Matthew told his new acquaintance jokes, shared some news, asked her questions about her life. He talked about himself, too. Matthew was an easy and pleasant person to talk to, charming, relaxed. He had a good tongue. The young man didn't go out of his way for a word. Stacy was immediately impressed by the sincerity with which he talked about his own life. And she was sincere with him, too. Matthew's honesty implied a reciprocal honesty. It turned out that Matthew and Stacy had a lot in common. Matthew, too, had grown up in the village, and he, too, was the eldest in a large family. Except that he didn't know his father and didn't remember him. He'd asked his mother, of course, but she didn't seem to remember who had given her her firstborn. Stacy's mother had started drinking after her husband died. Matthew's mother had been drinking for as long as he could remember. But Matthew, despite the lack of control and upbringing, still finished 9 grades, because he understood perfectly well without it he would not achieve anything in life, and dreams and ambitions were always present. So having finished 9 grades, the boy went to the city. The average score of the certificate was not too high, but still the boy was taken to the construction technical college. There was a shortage in one of the faculties. It was just luck. Matthew lived with his grandmother during his studies. She'd never been involved in her grandson's life before. She'd cut her failed daughter out of her life. As if at first tried to pull her out of the swamp, but realizing that it was useless, eliminated. But the eldest grandson did not drive away. She welcomed him warmly. She gave him a separate room and even provided him with money at first, until Matthew found a part-time job. The boy started working early. Life made him do it. While still living with his mother in the village, he mowed grass for someone, helped to paste wallpaper, and painted fences for neighbors. The pay was low, but there was enough for bread and milk. Sometimes there was also enough for sweets. If the boy had not taken care of himself, it is not known whether he would have survived or not. Because there was no hope for his mother, she was not interested in anything but the bottle. In the city, there were much more opportunities for part-time work, especially for a hard-working and not afraid of difficulties student of construction college. So many construction sites, and everywhere you need helpers, ready to do low-skilled work. And the pay was pretty good by Matthew's standards. When I was in college, my younger sisters were taken away to an orphanage. Matthew shook his head sadly. Some of the neighbors complained to the guardianship office. And they did the right thing. The girls would have been lost with their mother. I wanted to file a report myself, but I couldn't make up my mind. I thought maybe it was wrong. Matthew continued. I visited the sisters at the orphanage, bringing them candy and coloring books, asking about their lives. The girls told me that everything was fine, but they still missed their mother, despite her attitude towards them. And then one day I came and found out that the girls had been taken away to a family. I never saw them again. Maybe we'll meet again someday. Life is long. Stacy couldn't believe her ears. Matthew's story was exactly like her own. By the way, the guy listening to her story was also surprised and looked at her like she was his own. Even hugged her a few times. And the gesture was so warm, so natural, that Stacy didn't even feel embarrassed. And then my grandmother died, and I ended up on the street, because a lot of relatives got smart and took the apartment for themselves. Neither my mother nor I got anything. It happens. Matthew sighed. Not only did I lose someone I was very attached to, but I had to deal with a lot of domestic problems. I had to make amends. Matthew withstood the next challenge with fortitude and dignity. He got a full-time job because the money from his part-time job would not be enough for rent and groceries. He only had a year of college left. It was a difficult period, hard work on a construction site, plus studying at night. I had to scramble to keep up with lectures and keep my job. I was running back and forth like a stung man. I lost weight, I got gaunt. Almost didn't sleep for months before I got my diploma. But I got through it, Matthew said proudly. But now it's just work, he smiled. It's much easier than combining work and study. I can remember that time. Matthew worked, rented an apartment, just living. Everything seemed to be going well for him, given his background. Time flew by as we talked, and now they were at Stacy's house. The girl was getting annoyed. Wow, how fast they'd gotten there. I don't think this is a coincidence, Matthew said seriously. I've only known you for a short time, but I already feel that you're not a stranger to me. Stacy smiled. She felt exactly the same way. Matthew was so understanding, so strong and kind and good. She didn't want to part with him at all. I'll pick you up tomorrow, okay? We'll go for a walk somewhere. I'll show you my favorite places in the city. I'm sure you don't know any of them, Matthew said. So you don't mind? Of course, Stacy didn't mind. The young people exchanged phone numbers and hugged goodbye. Matthew didn't dare to kiss the girl. It happened a little later, during the very first date they had agreed on. An evening of getting to know each other. Stacy couldn't get enough of Matthew. She finally had a boyfriend. And what a guy. His innate talent for making people laugh made him an instant favorite in any company. Matthew knew and could do so many things. And of course he had a lot of friends. They would call him every now and then and ask him to go out. Matthew would tell them that he couldn't because he was out with his girlfriend. Stacy immediately felt very important and significant for the guy, and this feeling filled her heart with warmth. The young people moved in together quickly. Both felt it would be better for both of them. They didn't want to part after their outings anyway. Renting one apartment was much cheaper than renting two. Matthew moved in with Stacy because his apartment was in a remote neighborhood and Stacy's was more convenient to get to work. In the home, Matthew proved to be a homemaker. He could cook dinner, fix a faucet, and wallpaper. No detail escaped his attentive eye. The guy immediately saw the shortcomings and tried to eliminate them. True, during the joint residence some peculiarities became clear. Matthew could not live without his friends. They often called and met somewhere. After these meetings, Matthew always came back drunk, but not too drunk. It scared Stacy. She remembered what had happened to her mother because of her love of alcohol. Matthew's parents were no better. What if he turned out the same way? But the boy only laughed when Stacy shared her worries with him. Don't worry, I won't make the same mistakes as my mother. I've got my mother's example right in front of me. It won't happen to me, he said. Stacy repeatedly asked Matthew to take her with him to his friends, or invite these people to theirs. The girl wanted to meet the people who were important to her lover. But for some reason, Matthew didn't want those meetings. You see, there are only guys out there. We have our own things to do, our own jokes and conversations. And here you're a delicate, fragile girl. You can't even say a strong word in front of you. And what if someone takes a fancy to you? They'll take you away. I wouldn't want that, he explained. Stacy smiled. She was pleased with Matthew's explanation. Still, he spent too much time with his friends and came home drunk too often. The cloudy eyes, the wobbly gait, the odd wandering smile on his lips. It was a condition that frightened Stacy. And so it went for several years. Stacy and Matthew lived together. The young people became almost a family. At first, the girl dreamed that they were about to get married and, like everyone else, start planning children. The prospects were breathtaking. But these hopes were not destined to come true. Matthew was changing. Maybe he'd always been like this. Stacy just looked at the man she'd chosen through rose-colored glasses and didn't notice his flaws. In fact, at first, Matthew was trying to charm Stacy, showing his best qualities. He knew what it took to attract a girl like Annie. Matthew was disappearing more and more with his friends. Stacy waited for him at night, worried about what might happen to him on the street at this hour. Matthew had come home beaten up a few times before. He often came home drunk. Sometimes, far past midnight, the guy would fall on the couch and start singing loudly, even though he had to go to work in a couple of hours. Naturally, Matthew was unable to work after a night of drinking, and problems with work began. No employer wants an unreliable employee who can easily oversleep and not show up on time. Once or twice you could tolerate it, but when it happened again and again, Matthew was fired. The periods when the guy was out of work and out of money became longer and longer. During this time, Matthew was supported by Stacy. She paid his rent, bought groceries, and even gave him pocket money. He asked for it, and Stacy couldn't refuse. She genuinely felt sorry for Matthew. He was so sincerely remorseful each time, and he promised so convincingly that it was the last time it would happen that he would get clean, explaining his attachment to the bottle as a result of his difficult childhood. How could one not feel sorry for such a person? More on that later. Matthew changed not only outwardly, but also inwardly. He became aggressive. Now he could just yell at Stacy, call her names. Most of the time it was about money. Matthew demanded a lot of money, and Stacy's salary was small. The money was barely enough for the bare necessities. Matthew would just blow through her paycheck. Stacy couldn't even afford to go to a cafe with her friends once a month. Matthew hung out in bars almost every day. He and his buddies took turns throwing banquets. When it was Matthew's turn, he'd ask Stacy for money. He hadn't worked himself in years. Why should he? He was doing well enough. Stacy, of course, had long hoped for a miracle. She believed that with her love and attention she could pull Matthew out of the swamp that was dragging him deeper and deeper. Stacy offered to take Matthew to the movies, dragged him out for walks in the evenings, tried to find him a job herself. It was all to no avail. A couple of times Stacy wanted to leave Matthew, even packing her things. But when Matthew saw this, he tearfully begged her to stay. "I'll manage, won't I? I love you so much. I'll be lost without you. You'll see, I won't be able to live." Stacy sighed and stayed. She really thought Matthew would be lost without her. She was very angry with her husband's friends. They were the ones Stacy blamed for what was happening to Matthew. "Matthew is such a good guy. He's exactly the kind of guy I fell in love with. But unfortunately, Matthew has fallen in with the wrong crowd. His friends are dragging him down." As time went on, Stacy didn't see any change for the better. The girl suffered a lot. It is necessary to meet her love and again to lose a loved one because of addiction to drinking. Well, it was not her destiny. Living with Matthew was getting harder and harder. He didn't work at all. He didn't even work part-time like he used to. He was taking money from Stacy. She had to go grocery shopping on her way home on payday. She also transferred the rent to the landlord at once because her card was in Matthew's hands and he was looking forward to that day. And then that was it, no more money. Stacy tried to argue. Of course, she wouldn't give Matthew the card, explaining to him that it was wrong. But then he'd lose his temper, start screaming, smashing everything around him, calling Stacy all kinds of names. His eyes would glow with rage. Stacy was afraid of Matthew at those moments, even though he'd never laid a finger on her. "Why do you need him like that?" wondered her friends, who were aware of what was going on. "Throw him out of the house and let him live as he likes." If only it were that simple. For one thing, Stacy still felt sorry for Matthew and loved him. Stacy cared about Matthew. Moreover, she even felt responsible for him. Secondly, the girl was elementary afraid. She realized that Matthew wasn't going anywhere, and if Stacy ran away from him, Matthew would chase her. He was becoming more and more aggressive. It was simply dangerous to make a man like that angry. Stacy could see that Matthew's behavior and her own life were only getting worse. But she saw no way out of the situation, and so she accepted everything as it was. She even tried to justify Matthew's behavior. He didn't hit her. He truly loved her. He had swore at her when she was about to leave him. And then that terrible November evening came. Stacy came home early. It was a shortened day at the remedial school. The head of the department was celebrating her anniversary. Stacy returned in high spirits. She had received a bonus as one of the best workers. Pennies, of course, like her salary, but still nice. Stacy's paycheck was small, but she liked the work itself. She knew how to deal with special children. Stacy was happy to see her little students succeed. Each one she looked for an approach, and it was even interesting. But unfortunately, working in a government agency didn't pay very generously. Stacy was offered to move to a private developmental center with good money, but she could not leave the students who were so drawn to her. There were some of them who had no contact with anyone else at all. So for now, Stacy hesitated. So the girl came home early. Matthew was sitting in the kitchen, far from sober. Stacy was very tired. It had been a long week, and there were mountains of dirty dishes, ashes scattered on the table, crumbs on the floor, and things strewn about the room in disarray. Matthew's things. Stacy felt herself starting to boil. "Matthew, what kind of pigsty have you created here?" What pigsty? The boy looked around the kitchen with a hazy look. Clean it up. Now. You want it? You clean it up, Matthew retorted, reaching for another cigarette. She's going to boss me around. I've been at work all day. I'm tired. And you're sitting at home? I don't even ask you to cook, though I could. At least you can clean up after yourself, Stacy said. She realized she'd been wrong to contact Matthew too late. Stacy hadn't expected him to react that way. Yes, he could snap at her, call her hurtful words in response to a remark. But this time it was different. The guy suddenly grabbed his knife and moved toward Stacy. His eyes burned with a vicious fire. You bitch, I'm so sick of you. You're always buzzing around my ear like an annoying fly. Matthew, what are you doing? Put the knife down. Stacy reached for the door in fear. Matthew obeyed and threw the knife. It fell to the tiled kitchen floor with a cold sound. The guy walked over and punched the girl in the face so hard she couldn't keep her footing. Stacy hadn't realized Matthew was so strong. Her cheek immediately flared as if it had been burned by fire. Tears sprang from her eyes. Fear gripped Stacy's heart with an icy grip. She knew Matthew was capable of anything right now. She could see it in his eyes. I've wanted to do this for a long time, Matthew smirked. Now I'm going to do it my way. Do you understand? You're not going to open your mouth at me anymore. Stacy nodded. She knew better than to argue with Matthew. He was capable of anything. As if to prove his point, the boy walked up to her and shoved her so hard that she hit her head on the wall. Then Matthew also kicked the girl in the back. It must have been a weak kick, but the sharp pain immediately spread through her body. You know who's boss, don't you? You'll get more of that next time, Matthew said, and disappeared contentedly into the bedroom. Naturally, Stacy didn't wait for the next time. She knew it was dangerous to stay in the apartment with Matthew. He might even send her to the afterlife. His eyes were cloudy, half crazy. This was not the man Stacy had once loved. The girl stood up, waited until she was no longer dizzy, and slipped out the door. She didn't even take her things. She only grabbed the bag she hadn't had time to take off her shoulder. It contained her cell phone, her papers, the essentials. The rest was just a matter of time. The important thing was to get away from Matthew. He's a scary man, a monster, and Matthew is capable of hurting her, of maiming her. Even more than that, the girl has never been so afraid for her life. Stacy hurried down the stairs, fearing to hear the footsteps of an enraged Matthew behind her. He wouldn't think she was capable of escaping. But where would she go? She has no relatives in the middle of the night, no money either. Of course, Matthew will be furious when he finds her missing. Stacy wanted to be as far away from home as possible at that moment. The girl popped out into the cold November evening wearing a light coat, uncomfortable heeled shoes. It was cold, dark, uncomfortable. Stacy flew forward, unable to see the road. To keep warm, she jumped on the first bus she could find. It gave her time to catch her breath. Warm interior, soft seat, quiet, cheerful music, minimal passengers. Stacy stared out the window at the cityscape and wondered where to go. Nothing came to mind. Yes, Stacy had her friends Kira from work and her former classmate Mealy, but both were married with husbands and children. She didn't want to embarrass them. She started calling local hotels. As luck would have it, all the rooms were booked. What to do? Sure, said the stern female conductor, interrupting Stacy's frantic attempts to find a place to stay. The girl inhaled and stepped out of the cozy cabin into the unsightly night. A cold rain started the evening. Stacy's coat was immediately soaked through. The girl was completely frozen. Then she saw a supermarket in the distance, a place where she could wait out the downpour and think calmly about her situation. There had to be a way out, and Stacy would find it. She would. Just have to hide from the rain first. But I've been sitting here ever since. Stacy looked at Andrew as if waiting for his verdict. I think we should report him to the police, the man said. I can tell you've never been in this situation before. Stacy smiled. But when the police arrive, they'll find Matthew calm and sane. My words mean nothing. There's no sign of a beating. The police will leave and I'll be alone with Matthew. What do you think he'll do to me after that? Andrew shook his head. Yes, Stacy, of course you're completely right. Matthew will get away with it. Stacy, don't you have anywhere to go at all? No, the girl sighed sadly. Don't think anything bad. I'd like to offer you a place to stay tonight. I have a big house. I live there with my daughter. You will rest, and then decide how to proceed. What do they say? The morning is the morning. I hate to embarrass you, but I really don't have anywhere else to go. That's true, so I'll take it. Andrew realized that it was a strange, risky decision to let a complete stranger into the house, except that he couldn't leave the girl in trouble. She really needs help. It wouldn't be a big deal if Stacy slept over. Evie's nanny looked at Stacy with surprise as Andrew let her step forward into the house. But she didn't say anything. She was a professional and knew better than to meddle in the personal affairs of her employers. Evie's asleep in her room, the nanny reported. I wanted to wait for you, but you were late today. Thank you very much, and I apologize for the delay. Of course, you will be compensated for those hours. I'm sure they will. Nanny smiled. You're always very generous. Andrew showed Stacy to the guest room. The girl looked around in surprise. It was probably the first time she had ever been in such an environment. High ceilings, wide staircase, stylish interior. And you only live here with your daughter? She asked. Yes, the two of us, sighed Andrew. Excuse me, but where's the girl's mom? She is no longer there, he replied sadly. Andrew has long been accustomed to this question. Many people were surprised that the father was raising his daughter alone. Make yourself comfortable. Take a hot shower, you need to warm up. The fridge is down there. Take whatever you want. There are clean robes in the guest bedroom. All in all, make yourself at home. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry to bother you, Stacy said. It's no bother at all. Andrew smiled. The main thing is that everything ends well for you. Andrew went to his room. On the way, he looked into Evie's bedroom. The girl was sleeping sweetly under the blanket, putting her hand under her cheek. Her hair was strewn across the pillow. A light blush played on her cheeks. The nightlight on the nightstand glowed faintly, as always. Evie was afraid to stay in the dark. Andrew took a quick shower, changed into his pajamas, and laid his head down on the pillow with pleasure. How tired he was today. It was a little strange to realize that there was a stranger, a complete stranger, in the house right now. But Stacy was just a confused girl in a difficult situation. She wasn't lying. Andrew could feel it. By his age, he had learned to be a pretty good judge of character. Andrew woke up from an unusual sound, glanced at the clock. It was almost 4. What's wrong? There were still hours to go before the alarm clock rang. What woke him up? The singing. It was a quiet, gentle singing, something subtly familiar, even native. Andrew raised himself on his elbow and listened. The singing seemed to be coming from Evie's bedroom. What the hell was that? And then it hit him. He remembered that Stacy, the girl with the hard luck he'd picked up from the supermarket, was sleeping at the house tonight. The man jumped up and rushed into Evie's bedroom. Why was this girl sneaking into his daughter's room? What was on her mind? Andrew wanted to rush into the nursery to give the guest an interrogation, but he was stopped by a ringing child's voice. Again. Let's do it again. My mom used to sing this song to me. Andrew cautiously peeked into the bedroom. He saw a touching picture. His daughter was lying in her crib, looking at the visitor with a smile. Stacy was sitting nearby in a high chair, stroking the girl's head and softly singing her a lullaby. Andrew remembered the song. It had once been sung by his wife to their daughter. But how had the little girl memorized it at such a young age? He froze, not believing his ears. The girl was actually talking to Stacy. She asked to sing the lullaby again and said that her mother sang it to her. Andrew's heart was pounding frantically. He was afraid to believe that his daughter had finally spoken after a long silence. Maybe he just imagined after a dream? That's it, baby girl. It's time for bed. Stacy smiled as she tucked the girl in. Good night, said the girl clearly. Andrew barely held back a sigh of surprise. Just don't you go away. We'll see each other tomorrow, won't we? She asked. Yes, I'll see you. Stacy nodded. As she left the room, she ran into Andrew. Oh, we woke you up. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," she fussed. "It's just that the girl screamed in her sleep, and I ran to soothe her with a song out of habit. She always helps my students." "But how did you know her name was Evia?" "I did not tell you," surprised Andrew. "How did you know?" Stacy was surprised. "The girl told me. We met her. Let's go into the living room. I'll try to make the suggested revisions, keeping it close to the original text. I have a serious conversation to have with you." "Okay," Stacy flapped her eyes in confusion. She couldn't understand what was going on. "Oh." In the living room, Andrew slowly and thoroughly told her Evie's story. He had to mention Kira's death and the girl's many diagnoses. You see, since Kira's death, Evie hadn't spoken a word, and then suddenly she spoke. "I didn't realize she was speechless," Stacy said, surprised. "She got in touch with me as soon as she heard the lullaby. She said her mom used to sing that song to her." "Wow, poor child still remembers, although it would seem was quite tiny then," sighed Andrew. "I have a proposal to you, since you have such a beneficial effect on Evie. You are also a teacher. You have experience in dealing with special children. Could you be a kind of nanny or teacher for my girl? You don't have a place to live now, and here you'll have your own room. I won't hurt your salary." "Wow, this is so unexpected," Stacy exclaimed. "I'd love to be Evie's nanny, but I have a job. I can't leave my students, you know." "I understand," Andrew nodded. "You don't have to sit with her all day. The main thing is to come here after work, communicate with Evie, on weekends, maybe spend some lessons with her, or just walk. Naturally, if you need time to yourself, it's not even negotiable." But at any given moment, Andrew was willing to do anything just to keep Stacy by Evie's side. That girl had worked a real miracle. But what if she suddenly disappeared and his girl went silent again? What if leaving Stacy would be a new trauma for her? Stacy stayed at Andrew's house. She turned out to be a very smiling and friendly girl. Evie loved her new nanny, or as she called her friend. Stacy always knew how to keep her entertained. They drew together, made plasticine, even embroidered. Evie was talking now. Andrew couldn't believe it. "I make edits to the text, keeping it close to the original." Strangely enough, the speech of little Evie turned out to be very literate, developed. It turns out that all this time she was learning unnoticed from others, absorbed everything like a sponge, and now quietly built beautiful and long phrases. And it also turned out that Evie is an incredibly capable girl. She had a talent for the exact sciences, Stacy had said repeatedly. She'd make a great physicist or mathematician, she repeated. Stacy was a little wrong, however. Evie turned out to be a promising computer programmer. When in the 5th grade she started computer science, the girl immediately demonstrated outstanding talents. The teacher, of course, could not help but notice it. She immediately began to send her capable student to Olympiads of various levels, and almost always Evie returned with awards. Andrew couldn't get enough of his daughter. He was very grateful to Stacy because it was thanks to her talent, or rather her gift of communicating with special children, that Evie began to speak again. Stacy was in denial. "She's not my client. She didn't have any serious diagnoses or disabilities, just stress. That's how she reacted to losing her mother. I had nothing to do with it. She would have talked sooner or later on her own." Andrew didn't agree. He knew for sure that if it weren't for Stacy, his girl would have had to go to a special school for kids with serious mental health issues. And then what would Evie be like now? By the time Evie started winning her first awards as a young programmer, Andrew and Stacy were already married. Yeah, that's what happened. They were living side by side. At first, all their conversations revolved solely around Evie, and then somehow, gradually, it became clear to both of them that there was something going on between them. They were drawn to each other. It was pointless to deny it. By the way, Evie had been involved. The clever girl saw everything, understood everything, and was very happy about it. It was she who pushed her father to make the first step. One day, Evie told Andrew straight out that it was time to ask Stacy out. "You both need a date," the 10-year-old said with a sly smile. "Go ahead, ask her to the movies." "And you do not mind?" "Why would it? I wonder?" Surprised Andrew. I, on the contrary, in favor, nodded Evie. Only next time we'll go out together somewhere. Deal? So with Evie's encouragement, Stacy and Andrew began to meet. And then more and more. Soon it became obvious to both of them that they were literally made for each other. And so the wedding took place. Quiet, modest, but very beautiful and somehow cozy. Now Evie had a little sister, Mealy. She's 2 years old now. She is very perky and quick, just like her older sister at her age. By the way, it was Evie who chose the name for the baby. She adored her little sister, babysat her, taught her everything. Dressed up the little girl as a doll and even boasted about it in front of her many friends. Andrew was happy. He has a favorite loving wife and 2 wonderful daughters. Healthy, beautiful, intelligent. They have a close-knit family where everyone loves and supports each other. Stacy and Evie, they are like girlfriends in general. It's so nice to watch them when they do something together, cooking, discussing plans for tomorrow, choosing outfits for an event. Sometimes Andrew wondered what would have happened to him and Evie if he hadn't met Stacy at the supermarket, or would have walked past as he'd intended to do at first. Perhaps it was fate itself after all. The widow of the late doctor arrived at the old house, and barely had she gone to the village wedding. Alex had been stuck in traffic for 2 hours. Already half an hour ago, he was supposed to be at the reception organized by the investor on the occasion of his birthday. He'd driven straight from the clinic and hadn't even gone home to change. His wife Stacy called every 10 minutes to remind him not to be late. And he was late. A traffic jam this bad wasn't part of the plan. I don't know what happened out there. The cars stood dead still, shifting a meter every 5 minutes. And then stop again. All the cars behind and front on the side were already considered, and the drivers could be considered familiar. And that car overtook by half a meter. And now it was 1.5 meters behind. Some kind of entertainment, an old man in a Volga in front. Some sticks with red rags on the ends stick out of the trunk. On the left is a girl in an Audi. She talks on the phone all the time and occasionally looks at Alex with interest. On the right, the most desperate or the most brazen occasionally fly by on the side of the road. What's ahead of them is unknown. Alex wouldn't be nervous at all. Well, a traffic jam and a traffic jam. At last one could rest. But he imagined what Stacy would say to him when he got there. If he did. It's the wife calling again. Where are you? I don't know what to say anymore. Everyone's here, asking about you. You don't realize how important it is for you to be here. I really don't understand the importance. I don't know what I'm supposed to do there either. But I'm going. I can't fly over this traffic jam. Can't or won't. Stacy, I'll be there as soon as I can. Alex dropped the call. He doesn't need this reception. Let the investors talk to the clinic management. Why invite the department heads? What's the joy of celebrating a birthday in a crowd of unfamiliar people? Alex saw this investor once at the clinic, and suddenly he's honored to be invited, and with his wife. He would have preferred to go home, spend a quiet evening, read 2 interesting articles sent to him a month ago. Instead, he was going to some party where he had to keep a straight face and socialize with uninteresting people, and was indecently late. Stacy, unlike her husband, was glad of the invitation. She had rarely been able to attend receptions of this caliber. Was it not so much to look at others as to show herself? She realized that on her own, as a schoolteacher, no one in this high society is not interesting. But she was with her husband. And this husband, damn him to hell, can't get there. The ones who jump on the side of the road go somewhere. Maybe we should try it. Alex drove to the side of the road, skidded along the potholes for 500 meters and again found himself in a traffic jam, now on the side of the road. Further, the curb ended, and it was possible to pass only on the road. And those patiently standing in the lane were in no hurry to let those who liked freebies through. They wanted to cheat fate, so stand there now. And in another half an hour, Alex returned to the lane. A Volga with sticks and red rags loomed ahead. What he left from, he came back to. Irony of fate. Looks like he's only coming to the appointment to pick up his wife. That's fine. It's a shame about the time, though. We're finally getting going. And soon the cause of the jam became clear: a terrible accident. 3 cars and 1 truck. Rescue workers were scrambling around. People were pulled out of the cars. Then the emergency cars, like scrap metal, moved to the side of the road by machinery. One lane was freed for traffic. Drivers carefully drove around the crash site. Alex saw the wrecked cars of rescuers and ambulance doctors. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a man sitting on the ground by the truck's wheel with a crazy look, clearly in shock. Alex turned towards the accident. A lifeguard immediately ran up to him. "Get back on the road. This is not a circus. I'm a trauma doctor." "Oh, well, go ahead then. You're the man for the job." There were 10 victims, all with serious injuries. A guy was badly hurt, his spine was damaged, and a young woman, whom rescuers couldn't get out of the car for a long time. Her 3-year-old daughter, frightened and crying, was examined in an ambulance. Doctors dealt with the heaviest. The others with fractures and injuries were waiting their turn. Alex had been stuck in traffic for 2 hours. He was supposed to be at the reception, organized by the investor on the occasion of his birthday, half an hour ago. He'd driven straight from the clinic and hadn't even gone home to change. His wife Stacy called every 10 minutes, reminding him not to be late, and he was late. A traffic jam this bad wasn't part of his plan. I don't know what happened. The cars stood dead still, shifting a meter every 5 minutes. Alex looked at the surrounding cars and drivers, trying to distract himself. In front was an old man driving a Volga with some sticks with red rags sticking out of its trunk. On the left, a girl in an Audi was constantly talking on the phone and occasionally glanced at Alex with interest. On the right, desperate drivers periodically pulled to the curb. Alex himself wouldn't be particularly nervous, but he imagined what Stacy would tell him when he finally arrived. If he did arrive. His wife called again. "Where are you?" "I don't know what to say anymore. Everyone's here, asking about you. You don't realize how important it is for you to be here." "I really don't understand the importance. I don't know what I'm supposed to do there either. But I'm going. I can't fly over this traffic jam," Alex answered. "Can't or won't?" Stacy kept up. "I'll be there as soon as I can," Alex said tiredly and dropped the call. He didn't feel like going to this appointment at all. Let the clinic management talk to the investors. Why call ordinary managers? To celebrate someone's birthday in a crowd of unfamiliar people. Alex has only seen this investor once. He would prefer to go home, quietly read interesting articles, rather than go to a party where you have to keep your face and talk to uninteresting people, and even be indecently late. Stacy believed that the power of words could be used to keep students from doing bad things. The main thing is to properly explain what is good and what is bad. Her sincere impulses touched the students, and they agreed not to upset the young teacher, taking a kind of patronage over her. At 13, these idealists were convinced that they knew much more about life than their naive, saintly mentor. The whole class went hiking together, watched new movies, skated or played beach volleyball. Thus, in an atmosphere of mutual illusions, Stacy brought her class to graduation. Apparently, her teaching efforts were not in vain, because after graduation her students did not disappear from her life. They congratulated her on her birthday and New Year, came to share their troubles, or just to chat. Teachers with great experience and merit believed that such trusting relations with students were an indicator of professional unsuitability. Our task is to provide education, and to make friends with students is the height of unprofessionalism. There is not enough mental strength or time for everyone, they said. Most likely they were jealous of Stacy, but for some reason they couldn't admit it. In high school, Stacy met Alex. He was 12 years older than her, a mature and confident man. His son went to this school, and one day his father came to the parent-teacher conference instead of his mom. Alex was attracted to this enthusiastic teacher with an unconventional approach to pedagogy. He divorced his wife 3 years ago and had no contact with her at all. The separation from his son was too painful. They met only occasionally. That day Alex came to the parents' meeting for the first time in his life because his ex-wife suddenly called, threw a tantrum, and demanded that he immediately dropped all his affairs and went to the school to save his son. What to save him from, she didn't explain. Why she didn't go herself, it was clear she was in no condition. Alex realized that most likely nothing terrible had happened, but still went to the school. One should be aware of the events. And suddenly Kieran really needs to save his son, if not from the school, then from his mother. Alex hadn't seen Kieran in a while. "We need to talk." He was ready to take Kieran with him, but he was afraid that his ex-wife, left alone, would go crazy. And Vincent, feeling sorry for his mother, refused to move in with his father. Alex was worried, but he didn't think it was possible to put pressure on his son. He was an adult and would figure it out on his own. After the meeting, Alex approached Stacy. He really didn't understand why his ex-wife was so hysterical. AC in physics? A conflict with a classmate isn't a disaster. It's just high school life. Unpleasant, sure, but no reason to declare a rescue mission. Stacy confirms there's no problem. Vince is a wonderful boy, a little withdrawn, but kind and talented, she said. Alex had already realized that all students were wonderful and talented to her. She would even justify a bully and find a lot of positive qualities in him. An amazing girl. There aren't many like her left. Alex always came with flowers, gallant and courteous. Stacy's friend, history teacher Kira, in common parlance Millie, colorfully told how the teachers reacted to her novel. These envious women can only discuss you. For them, teacher and nun are synonymous. You can't have a teaching career if you've got a man. Or rather, you've got the wrong guy. If you'd brought out some loser, that's a yes. And self-sufficient, independent man they will not appreciate, and therefore in your selfless labor. A happy, loved, prosperous woman. What can she teach her children? How will she prepare them for the rigors of life? Millie mocked them. You're overreacting, Stacy countered. Half of our teachers are married. Married ones are there, not happy ones. How would you know? Millie countered. Why do they make you feel bad about yourself? Why don't they just be happy for you? Tell me. If I was going to marry a good man, what would you say? I'd wish him happiness, Stacy replied sincerely. Millie was right, none of her co-workers were happy for Stacy. They were just gloating and wondering when Alex would leave her. You don't have to get married, Stacy said. You do. Don't give them anything to gloat about. There's no turning back. Stacy was in love. Alex was so serious, so thorough. He was even courting like he had a plan. It was all clearly laid out. The fact that Alex was married didn't bother Stacy. It was strange if a man had never been married by the time he was 40. What confused her was that he never said a word about his ex-wife. So many years together, they had a teenage son, and it was as if Alex had erased her from his memory. What had happened between them? Why had they divorced? Stacy wondered. Alex wouldn't tell her, just dismissed it. She's not in our lives anymore. I wouldn't think about her at all. But there's a son. I've helped him, and I'll continue to help him. Don't worry, we'll be fine. And indeed, everything was fine. They arranged a small wedding trip, rented a house for a week on the coast in Miami. Sun, sea, and no one but the two of them. They just didn't need anyone. Stacy looked at her husband, and only one thought was racing through her mind. How do I love you? How is it that of all the men on earth, I got the best one? She was ready to stare into his gray, most beautiful eyes in the world all day long. No one had ever been so happy. Stacy began to doubt her mental faculties, for she could think of nothing but her husband. Only love and happiness. In all the years that followed, when longing struck, Stacy remembered that week of boundless happiness on the ocean, and it warmed her heart. She longed to return to that place and experience the same feelings again, to remember what it was like to be truly happy. 7 years of life together flew by unnoticed. Love, of course, did not go away, but it became ordinary, not causing the same excitement. When Alex didn't show up for that important appointment at the clinic, Stacy took offense. He'd left her alone among strangers. No one cared about her. Her co-workers tried not to leave her alone, but everyone was vapid. Stacy felt superfluous. When someone looked at her, she felt like she was being pitied, perplexed as to who she was and what she was doing here. She was still hoping Alex would come. When he stopped answering his cell phone, Stacy hailed a cab and headed home. She'd had enough of this embarrassment. At home, she stood in front of the mirror. A tall, slender woman in an elegant dress, with a beautiful, intelligent face, looked back at her. She felt sorry for this beauty, she cried. She had been preparing so much, dreaming that everyone would appreciate their beautiful couple, would say compliments, and Alex would be proud of his wife. Instead of compliments, indifference. instead of a pleasant evening longing and loneliness. Stacy cried until midnight, then got angry. Then she calmed down, deciding that she shouldn't get worked up. Alex was about to come and explain everything. He did come, but Stacy waited in vain. No explanation or apology followed. Alex didn't even ask how the evening had gone. Either he didn't remember the reception or he thought it was nothing. Stacy couldn't take it anymore, walked over to her husband, snatched the magazine from his hands, threw it on the floor, and asked, looking into his surprised eyes, "Where did you go yesterday? Aren't you interested in how I had fun? You left me alone and now you won't even explain." "Stacy, I'm tired," Alex replied, picking up the magazine from the floor and continuing to read it. And that was it. No more explanations followed. That's how indifferent it was, just impenetrable. How badly it made my soul feel. What should I do to make him come out of his shell and show some feelings? Change him, or what? Die, maybe? I wonder if he'll notice. Probably just happy to be distracted from work again. Another sleepless night and desperate loneliness in the morning. This morning was neither good nor wise. At any rate, neither were the evenings. Not a single wise thought came during the night. What to do with a personal life that was going downhill? Stacy decided to take the tried and true route. She should go to Millie's. She always had a way of setting things right. Millie's loyal friend was a big fan of Alex, thought Stacy was complaining about her fat. There are no husbands like her anymore, and you can tell from experience. Millie had been married twice over the years and considered herself an expert on husbands, both her own and other people's. Her first husband was an artist, a musician, a poet, 3 in 1. Life with him was a total celebration, a wrench in the air. Millie said that mostly in her head he was fun and unpredictable. An unrecognized talent, an unaccomplished genius. A bohemian, a boy who hadn't grown up. Husbands are like trained animals in the circus, Millie said. He seems to be trained, but it's not clear what to expect from him. And we lived in starvation from lack of money. Millie went to the other extreme. Her second husband was a boring middle-class bureaucrat. Not young, unattractive, but with means and connections. The presence of a young and beautiful wife sharply raised his authority in the eyes of colleagues. So he spared no expense on his doll. In addition, his wife a schoolteacher, somehow out of status, so now Millie taught at the university. All would be nothing, but tolerate his boring Millie long could not. She got divorced and got a good apartment in the city center from a miser as a payoff. Now she was in full chocolate and in the active search for the next husband. Millie sincerely thought that her friend was lucky. Alex is handsome, smart, and a great doctor. Not boring, doesn't drink, doesn't cheat. What more do you need? She'd never had a love like Stacy's before. All she could do was dream and envy. Stacy showed up looking as gloomy as a cloud with tears in her eyes. "Why don't you have a quiet life?" Millie asked. "He doesn't notice me at all. If I disappear, he'll only realize when he can't find supper. And supper isn't always at home, so he won't find it right away. He doesn't care about me at all. Remember when I went to college, I consulted with him. I couldn't make up my mind. A month ago, he asked me how I was doing in school." "Stacy, are you exaggerating? I don't get the image of Alex in my head. It's not about him. He's a reasonable man. Yeah, he's very busy with work, but that's good. Who's so obsessed with work that they forget their wife at appointments? You think he's got a woman?" "No, he doesn't. But maybe it would be better. At least it would be clearer. You, girlfriend, don't take it out on your husband. He's tired, he'll come to his senses, and everything will be fine. For a man like your Alex, you'll have to look harder." "What man?" Stacy was outraged. "I'll throw him out, take him to the woods and leave him there." "I'm sorry to hear that," Millie grinned. "Stacy, my friend, where are you?" "I don't need this. What are you doing? If you throw him out, they'll pick him up. Look, I really don't understand what's wrong with you. There's no such thing as crazy love for life. You've had it. But I haven't. 2 husbands, and not one heavenly love. You're a lucky girl. Don't make God angry." "Maybe you're right." Stacy sighed. "What's the matter? I'm coming at you again with my melancholy. You're welcome. I'm always at your service. A few days later, all the news programs started with breaking news from Alaska. Another earthquake had struck there. The country watched with bated breath the statistics of dead and wounded. Rescuers and doctors from all over the country flew to Alaska. Alex was going to be part of one of the teams. "Stacy, you have to understand, I can't not go, because I'm needed there now," he said. "Don't worry, I'll be home in a week." Stacy watched the news like a bulletin from the front. One day she saw Alex in a story about doctors. Worried, she called him. He answered. Her heart ached. She chased away the dark thoughts. What could happen? He doesn't go into the rubble. He helps those who have already been harassed. Suddenly there was a new jolt. More dead and wounded. Alex didn't call for 2 days. He didn't answer the phone. Finally a call. "No, it's not Alex. It's an unfamiliar number." "Yeah, I'm listening," Stacy answered. "Stacy? It's for you. Your husband Alex was killed in Anchorage during a debris removal in the village of New Life. I'm so sorry for your loss. We're covering all transportation costs." "What's not covered? What transportation? Are they talking about Alex? What do you mean, dead? Is everyone out of their minds?" Stacy dialed Alex's number. He wasn't answering for some reason. She heard a ringing in her ears. Then there was a rumbling sound of someone banging on the door. She got up, went to the door, stood looking at it, not understanding how to open it. Something unpleasant had been said to her. She couldn't remember what. Who was knocking like that? "There's a bell, isn't there?" Stacy opened the door. Behind her stood Alex and fellow doctors from the clinic. "What's up? Are they here?" "It's not Alex's birthday," she said absently. Suddenly it was clear in her head, dead. Condolences. Stacy didn't remember anything else. She woke up when the coffin was lowered into the grave, screaming, rushing in. She was held, thrashing in someone's arms and screaming. Then the memory lapsed again. Like Millie and Vince were saying something, feeding her something. When she came to, she was surprised she was alive. No, not surprised. I was upset. Why alive? Millie, like a guardian angel, was always there to keep Stacy from falling into the abyss. She calmed her down, persuaded her, drew prospects, pushed her into action. In short, after a couple months, Stacy could be talked to without fear of going crazy. To be honest, Millie hadn't expected Stacy to be so out of it. I get it, a loved one had died, but to throw herself so out of her life, Millie looked after Stacy herself. Gradually, she came to her senses, went back to her normal life. It was depressing, but it was manageable. The "I can't live without him" thoughts were gone. At least she tried. Things gradually settled down. Stacy shuddered at night, cried. Sometimes she even forgot to grieve during the day. Then she remembered, but she didn't grieve as much. It was almost 6 months after Alex's death. Then one day Millie suddenly asked, "Stacy, have you applied for an inheritance?" "What application? Why?" "Well, your husband had assets like this apartment. It's his apartment, by the way. Here. And he has a son, an heir. The ex-wife can't claim, but the son can. I'm guessing you and Vince are going to have to share the apartment. And if he doesn't inherit, there's nothing to split. So get the deed to a notary tomorrow." That doesn't make any sense. It hadn't occurred to Stacy that she'd have to share the apartment she'd lived in for so many years, used to thinking of it as hers. It was only now, after Millie's words, that she realized she wasn't. She's a resident. She can't be kicked out, but it's not her apartment. The notary was a young girl with a stern look and not at all respectable hair, a ponytail on top of her head. She looked at the documents, accepted Stacy's application, and explained thoroughly that she would inherit half of the apartment, half of the car, and half of the dacha by law. She advised her to negotiate with the second heir, Vince, for the child. How do we divide it all up? Who gets the car? Who gets the cottage? Who gets the apartment? Stacy was prepared to give up the car and the summer house if they'd let her stay in the apartment. She just didn't have anywhere else to live. She knew it wasn't equal. Vince probably wouldn't mind, but his mother was still there. Some strange notice came in about land and property tax arrears. Stacy thought at first it was for the cottage and the apartment. But why in her name? The all-knowing Millie advised her to go to the registry and find out what was going on. Oh, that counselor. I'm having second thoughts. That's not good, Stacy sighed. I wouldn't be surprised if Alex's ex-wife was up to something. But signing the property over to me so I don't have to pay taxes. That's stupid, even for her. And last year's taxes. Maybe Alex signed something over to me. We didn't buy anything. Everything we own was bought a long time ago. The registry gave Stacy a deed to a 53-square-foot lot and house in Brooklyn Village. Brooklyn who? What house? I've got an apartment to take care of. The only thing missing was the house. She was upset. Life was getting a little too stressful. Unable to understand, Stacy called Alex's friend and colleague Joshua. But Joshua, did Alex say something to you about a house in the country? You mean Brooklyn? It's a nice cabin. I loved it. Janie and I stayed there for a month last year. Alex said he bought it for the future, and he's going to build it into a cottage and live there when he retires. Why didn't I know about this? And why did he put it in my name? I can understand that. He's older than you. Probably wanted you to have something of your own in case something happened to him. He didn't tell you because he didn't have to. He wanted to build a palace for the princess first, and then bring the princess to the palace. Who knew he wouldn't make it in time? Oh, I'm sorry. What are we going to do with this palace now? Whatever you want. But I wouldn't sell it if I were you. It's a wonderful place. You should go and see it. The doorbell rang. Stacy said a quick goodbye to Joshua and went to answer it. Standing outside the door was an inebriated woman with permanently dyed red hair. The woman shook her red curls. Without waiting for an invitation, she entered the apartment and walked through the rooms. Who are you? Stacy asked. Me. My son Vince owns this apartment. I want to live with my son. You don't have kids, you don't understand. I'm going to live with my son. But Vince only owns half of the apartment, and the other half is mine, Stacy argued. Great. We'll live together. I don't mind roommates. How are we going to divide up the rooms? Look, you can't be serious. We can't live in the same apartment. I don't want to. Well, if you don't leave, we'll have to. Think about it. I'll bring my stuff the day after tomorrow. Bye. What do we do now? What do you do in a situation like this? You run to a friend. So Stacy went to Millie's. She called Vince, asked him to come over. I wanted to know if the idea of living together was his mom's fantasy or their decision. Vince wasn't reassured. His mother's decision was Alex's revenge, albeit belated, to get Stacy out of the apartment. Vince had urged his mother, offered her options. But she wouldn't listen. She didn't want the apartment so much as she wanted to show her power. She's not going to give up. She's going to ruin her life any way she can. Vince left. Her friends were left to grieve. Why don't you buy half the apartment off her? If it's not enough money, I'll add to it, Millie suggested. I'm afraid she won't sell. It's important to her to humiliate me. She's dreaming about how she's going to humiliate me, ruin my life. She won't take any money for that kind of pleasure. Vince knows it's impossible to live like this, but he can't do anything about it. She's got this idea to move in with me. It's fun and revenge for her miserable life. You should have seen her. She has a goal to kill me. That's the kind of fun she'd like to have. Listen, is this crazy woman seriously going to live with the widow of her ex-husband? Millie was horrified. Apparently so. Moving in with me, she will live for now, but then it will still need something to do with the apartment to decide to sell, to divide. Well, you've been on the prowl, and I've been running around. No, friend, I'm not my enemy. I don't want to be without you. Who do you want to be with? Living with that crazy woman in the same apartment. I'm not seriously considering it myself, Stacy said. I have an unfinished palace. I'm going to go check it out. Where? The country? It's in the middle of nowhere. No, it's not. I looked. It's only 200 kilometers away. I need to recover. I'll go, then I'll wake up and decide how to live my life. Millie, I feel like I need this. If I don't try to start over, I'm gonna die. I don't know. Maybe it will work, Millie said doubtfully. It seemed like a decision had been made. But it was so scary to change her established, stable life for the unknown prospect of living in a village Stacy had never been to. But then some builders showed up, measuring the height of the opening and asking which walls were load-bearing. Clearly, they were doing a huge renovation. "Are you registered here?" the woman asked. "Well, live here. No one is forcing you out. We have a reservation." Stacy quickly put her things in her bag and rushed to the bus station. Didn't wait for the red-headed vigilante to show up. Enough with the nerves. Though in the queue at the ticket office she suddenly remembered that she had a car. She was kicked out of her apartment, so at least she could have her car. I didn't doubt that they would track her car. They wouldn't deny themselves such a pleasure. But for now, we can drive to the village. Where am I going? What for? How will I live? I'll figure it out when I get there. Strange village. Not a lantern, not a light. The time is 21:00, and the village is dead. Either they're asleep or there's no light. Where do we go from here? Where's the heir to the estate? Yeah, there's people here. Apparently the car is a novelty around here. Crawled out to have a look. At least they'll tell us where to go. They did. But they looked warily what kind of a lady brought here at night. And there's really no light. There's probably a candle somewhere, but how do you find it around here? Stacy shined the flashlight on her phone. She found the bed and went to sleep. I'll figure it out tomorrow. She couldn't sleep with hunger. She broke all the cookies she'd taken on the road. There was nothing else to sleep on. Stacy didn't immediately realize where she was. Oh yes, the village. No lights, but there was a manor. I'd have to look around. I'm also very hungry. Is there a store here? Stacy's house was impressive. Nice furniture, big windows, curtains, dishes, fridge, TV, everything. You could tell Alex really wanted to live here. Everything's been thought out and arranged with love. He didn't tell her anything, but he made it look like he'd consulted her. Stacy wouldn't change a thing about this house. She loved it. The house was neglected and unkept, but that was fixable. Stacy stepped out onto the porch. It's beautiful. It's like a garden. Lilacs in bloom, pink apple trees, some shrubs she didn't know the names of. Unsupervised raspberries grow all over the plot. Under the apple trees in a thicket of burdock stands a table. A swing hanging from a branch. The ropes are almost rotten. Behind the house, impassable cherry tree stands a solid white wall. Then I'll have to climb the plot to see what else grows here. But now it's not about flowers and berries. I have to find a store and buy groceries. Because I'm so hungry I feel dizzy. There was salt, sugar, macaroni, a pack of tea, and a bottle of sunflower oil in the refrigerator, which was turned off. Probably hidden from the mice. Stacy took out the groceries, turned on the refrigerator, and went looking for the store. A woman in her 60s looked at her curiously from behind a neighboring fence. "Daughter, who do you think you are?" The house was empty. Today I saw someone walking around the yard. The owner, Alex, is here, a doctor from the city. Are you his wife? She called out. Widow Stacy said the word aloud for the first time. It was sharp, harsh, hopeless. It divided life into before and after. "Oh, I'm sorry, you old fool. I'm minding my own business," the woman said. "My name is Esmeralda, Aunt Esme, and what's yours?" "Stacy. Can you tell me where your store is?" "It's right down the street. It's right downtown. It's got the store, the school, the administration. You'll have to come and see me if you need anything." "Thank you, Aunt Esmeralda." Stacy walked down the street, looking around the village. It was interesting and completely different from her idea of rural life. Once upon a time, while still in college, she had traveled to visit her friend Maggie. It had been her first and only experience of village life. Since then, Stacy was sure that the countryside was dusty streets with lush grass, old houses and vegetable gardens with potatoes and cucumbers. And certainly no decorations in the form of flowers and ornamental bushes. A village is poverty, lack of amenities, and hard work. It's no place for flowers. Whether that village was in the middle of nowhere, or whether things had changed dramatically over time. But now Stacy was pleasantly surprised. In Pokrovka there were good houses. In front of each yard there was a well-tended front garden. Even the streets were not gray and dusty, but green, with flowering trees and bushes. The appearance of a new person in the village was an event. As they walked toward the store, curious eyes peered from behind every fence. 15 times Stacy said hello and explained who she was. Vigilance in the village was at an all-time high. No one passed unnoticed. Somehow the rumors got to the store before Stacy did. 10 people came to see the town girl. The store was full. Nobody bought anything. That's not why they came. They waited, wondering why she'd come and how long she could hold out. They're not evil people, but they're wary of anything new. They know their own people inside and out. It's clear what to expect from whom. This one will give his shirt off his back, the same spender. This one's eager to help. This one's a slacker. But they're all family members. And here's someone who's arrived. They say she's young and beautiful. That's a problem too. There are only 3 single men in the village. We don't have enough. And there's competition. They looked at Stacy frankly and appraisingly. They were careful to ask questions. You're beautiful. Are you coming here for a long time or just for a week? No, I'm not staying for a week. I don't know how long though. What are you going to do? You must be some kind of manager, right? Or a designer. You don't know how to work with your hands in the city. Yeah, I'm not much of a teacher. That's good. We have a big school. We need teachers. But it's hard to live in the countryside. In winter it gets so snowy you can't leave the house. At least we have gas, so we don't have to heat the stoves. And you can't live without a vegetable garden. And they don't bring vegetables here. Aunt Kate didn't scare the man who attacked Stacy. The sales clerk did. I don't carry vegetables. You're not going to buy them. If I have to, I will. No way. Who eats these store-bought vegetables? Can't we share cucumbers and tomatoes? You, daughter, come to my place. I still have some potatoes and carrots left, and I'll give them to you. Thank you. Ladies, are you going to buy anything? If not, go with God. It's like a social club in here. Stacy picked up some groceries. It's a little heavy. We need a bucket, a mop, dishwashing detergent, window cleaner, and a few other little things. I can't carry everything. Are you going to clean up? The salesgirl asked. Well, yes. The house has been closed since last summer. The dirt has accumulated. Let's do it this way. You take what you need now. I'll bring the rest of the stuff along with all the cleaning supplies in a couple hours. My husband's coming home for lunch, so we'll load everything up. And after work, I'll come and help. You're going to be cleaning this house for a week. My name's Digit, by the way. Yeah, that's a little awkward. Come on, I'm curious about you. I'm curious about what kind of bird you are. Let's get to know each other. Oh, I'm Stacy. You don't have to tell me. The whole village knows. Stacy came out of the store, looked around. Here's the school. You can see the kids running around in the yard. It's either gym class or practice or something. I should stop by and see what jobs they have. See if I really have to stay here. So where do we start our new life? Should we make some food? No, sandwich and tea first, then cooking. You're going to choke on your own saliva. After the sandwich, Stacy thought things were looking good. Life was getting better. Now, Digit's bringing in some household chemicals. The first thing to do is clean the windows to get some sunshine and shine. Stacy looked around the house. The gray furniture, the dull windows, the dusty curtains. If everything was washed, it would be cozy. Where's Digit? I can't wait. Digit arrived, as promised, with a young man. A handsome, smiling blonde. Maybe not a fiancé, he was interested, looking interested, clearly trying to please Digit. His name was Alex. Okay, we're off. Alex has to go to work. Digit pushed Alex towards the door. I'll pick up Millie from the garden tonight and come over. What Millie? Stacy didn't understand, but Digit was already running to the car. Millie turned out to be a little red-haired girl named Alice, Digit's daughter. The work went faster with the helpers, and in the course of the evening they had cleaned most of the house. There were still some little things left to do. Tired, but encouraged by the result, sat down to drink tea. But Millie didn't make it to tea, she fell asleep. Digit, who's Alex? They say there are only 3 single men here. One of the 3 was killed, Stacy asked. You should have seen those bachelors, laughed Digit. The most eligible one is Uncle Vincent. He's about 60 years old. You're not going to get anything. He's been courting your neighbor Aunt Esmeralda for about 30 of his 60 years. For as long as I can remember, he's been doing it all his life. He can't make up his mind to propose. And the second bachelor doesn't get a second look from even the most stale 40-year-olds. Nick went to school in the big city. They say he's a computer genius, works from home, lives with his mom, doesn't go anywhere, doesn't talk to anyone. His mom said he was married. The village doesn't believe it. Someone thinks he is abnormal, but everyone agreed he is unfit for socializing, much less marriage. The headmaster didn't mind. It's a good thing, but impossible. In the school for several years did not work gymnasium. There was no money for repairs. The hall is almost emergency. Physical education lessons were held outside, running and soccer in summer, skiing in winter. Then Kiran, the athlete's name, disappeared from the village for a while. Then he came back with a decision to finance the renovation of the gym and a coaching position. That's when it turned out that Kiran, a 3-time national boxing champion, lives in their village. True, he hasn't performed for a long time. He refused to participate in the World Championship. And why no one knows how he ended up in this village is also a mystery. But the locals were sure that there was a woman involved. His daughter was also not candid with anyone, seriously engaged in boxing. Kiran took her to district and regional competitions. Our girls, of course, became animated, poked fun at him and so, but to no avail. He's kind of withdrawn and unsociable. It's like he and his daughter don't need anyone at all. He's only friends with Andrew. But that's how we call the school principal. His real name is Alexander Sergeyevich Voloshin. As bachelors, everything is clear. But where did you get your Alex? Or is he married? Stacy asked. No way. It's too expensive to get involved with married people here, said Digit. We've had a couple of stories like that around here. They didn't end well. Alex is from a neighboring village not far from here. It was a big village with a big school. Kids from neighboring villages went to school here. The school bus brought those who lived close by. The children from the distant villages lived in a boarding school. Digit and Alex had known each other since they were in the 1st grade. As Alex told Alex later, he fell in love with Digit in the 4th grade. Digit was a girl with a lot of wind. She liked one boy or the other. It wasn't until her senior year of high school that she noticed Alex. But what a love it was, a real, youthful love. For life, of course. When it was impossible to breathe without each other, they drew a calendar and crossed off the days until their 18th birthday, when they could get married. Digit's parents weren't against her relationship with Alex, but thought it was a little early to go into the army. Then fine. Digit enrolled in Lyceum. Alex went into the army. In the city, Digit was surrounded by new life, impressions, acquaintances, new love. Digit became pregnant, and the future father suddenly disappeared, not appreciating the happiness that happened. Digit cried and went back to her mother. She cried too and said the usual "I told you so." She hugged her wayward daughter and began to prepare for the birth of the baby. Digit avoided Alex. She was ashamed to look him in the eye. But at night she cried, pitying her first love. That was it. Her love life was over. She would have no love, no family. One joy, red-haired Alice, her mother's happiness. Alex couldn't get over his Digit, tried to live without her. But it didn't work. You know, Stacy, he says he can't live without me. We need to be together. After all, we've lost so much time, said Digit, relaying her friend's words. I don't believe it. How can you forgive betrayal? I chose my destiny. I'm fine, and I don't need anyone. And he just keeps coming and coming. Everything's fine. My eyes are wet, replied Digit. She chose her fate. Ask your fate if she doesn't like your choices. You've been given a chance to get it all back, to be happy. So grab it. Why are you showing off your pride? Stacy said. I can't get anything back. Not a chance. Oh, Stacy, I'm sorry. I'm just sitting here complaining. Silly me. Digit, if you love me, don't be stupid. Now, you've made your mistakes. Don't make another one. You'll never forgive yourself. Oh, look, there's plenty of time. Digit picked up a sleepy Alice. Oh, my darling. It's a shame to wake her up, but she's a big girl. Not Nika. Okay, bye. I'll see you tomorrow. Digit. Thanks for your help. It's a lot of work. Don't kid yourself. For a couple more days, Stacy tidied up and shined. The house was clean, cozy, lived in. It's beautiful. If she could just get the grounds sorted out, it would be a manor house. But Stacy couldn't tackle the grounds alone. She'd need a lot of muscle. All right, we'll do it slowly. Sitting at home all day was getting a bit boring. Stacy decided it was time to go out, at least to school. Stacy had imagined the headmaster of the village school to be old, fat, with glasses, shortness of breath, and the tired look of a troubled man. But he turned out to be young and energetic. When Andrew learned that a certified, experienced Russian teacher had come to visit him, he was overjoyed. "Stacy, you have no idea how we work here," he said. "I am a math teacher, and I also teach physics. A chemist teaches biology, geography, and a history teacher teaches Russian. You understand what level of knowledge? The only foreign language we have is German. And there are no other teachers. We study in 2 shifts. Not because there are too many students, not because there's not enough space, but because there aren't enough teachers. Come on, I'll show you the school." Andrew talked about the school only in the superlative. He was proud. Stacy hadn't expected that a school in the countryside could be as well equipped as any city school. The chemistry lab, the computer lab, the language class, everything was top-notch. Maybe the repairs are simpler, but the atmosphere is homelike. "It's cozy," Stacy said in the gym. A boxing ring was set up in the far corner. Students crowded around it. From the excitement and cheers, something very interesting was going on. Stacy didn't understand anything about boxing, thinking it was a martial art. What kind of sport is it where they hit each other over the head all the time? Andrew walked toward the ring. Stacy preferred to watch from a distance. She can't even watch it on TV, much less live. In the ring, the fight was over and the athletes took off their helmets. Stacy was amazed to see that it was a girl waving her fists. Short, frail, pretty, about 15 years old. The coach came up to her. Tall, strong, with powerful arms, he hugged the girl, said something, and she nodded and agreed. Kiran. The principal waved his hand at the coach. "Come here, Alex, I have a training session." "Your training will wait," said Andrew. "Go," I said. But he addressed Kiran by his first name in front of the students. That's fine if they're friends, but there are professional ethics. After all, a blow to the head doesn't go unnoticed. Stacy, the principal, addressed the new teacher. "This is Kiran, the coach. He's got all the boys from the village here. He's got the little ones and the ones who've left school. Kiran, Stacy will be teaching Russian, I hope." "Hello," said the coach. Up close, he looked huge. He looked at me with a frown, not at all friendly. He did not care about his new colleague, about the Russian language. A rude bore. At least he pretended it was nice to meet you. I'm surprised his children aren't afraid of him. The girl who had just fought in the ring approached them. "This is Joshua." Andrew smiled. "Our pride, a champion of the district and winner of regional competitions. Dad says she's very capable. She belongs in big sports." "That's my daughter," Kiran muttered. "I'm sorry, it's probably none of my business. But aren't you afraid for your daughter?" "It's not a woman's sport," said Stacy. "It's none of your business," said the coach. "Okay, that's it. We're done talking. Time to go. Andrew, thanks for the tour. I'll bring the documents tomorrow. Bye." Stacy walked towards the exit of the gym. She heard the principal quietly reprimanding Kiran. "Are you out of your mind? What do you want? Bear horny. You're not mad at Daddy?" Stacy caught up with the boxer girl. He promised with his boxers. He forgot how to talk to women. "How are you guys settling in here? Do you want me to help you?" "I'm afraid Daddy would mind." "No, he won't. He's not mean, he's just unhappy. He needs to come out of his shell and socialize. He doesn't want to. He's not here either. Let's be friends. And Dad, I'm sorry, I know he's in his own words. His conscience is killing him. He'll apologize tomorrow." "Okay, we'll see. Hey Joshua, come by if you get bored. She's such a sweet girl. And she loves her daddy," Stacy thought. I wonder why she called him miserable. Something terrible must have happened. If a person is so closed in on himself, shut off from everyone with his ostentatious indifference and deliberate rudeness. Stacy liked the school and Principal Andrew. She decided she would be comfortable in her new job. One unpleasant person doesn't make the weather, and she's not interested in boxing. So Coach Kieran could be ignored, communication minimized. She was starting a new life, excited about the changes that were coming. No one would be able to throw her off her joyous mood. Not even someone as unpleasant as Kieran. Stacy caught herself thinking that whatever she was thinking about was being lumped in with that coach. That was just what was missing. What did she care about him? Stacy brought her diploma and employment history to school, wrote her application, and was hired to Andrew's outright glee. Too bad it's the end of the school year. But starting in September, everything will go according to plan. And now there is time to assess the equipment of the classroom, something to add, correct, prepare a curriculum. Joshua often came in, chatting and helping. Although Stacy had vowed not to talk to Kieran, she had to see him. He looked for and found her in the Russian language room after training. By the way, for the scene of acquaintance, he, as Joshua said, apologized. Communication was very low-key, hello, goodbye, how are you? Stacy finally got to work on the property. It took a long time to gather her courage, telling herself that it was no big deal, that other people could handle it. In full uniform, gloves, galoshes, with a shovel and hacksaw, went to war on cherry bushes up to 1/2 meter high. I dug, but no way they have roots, to the center of the earth, or what, grow to the center of the earth. I was digging something out, sawing something. I got tired, sat down under the apple tree, and got upset. There's enough to saw or not to saw for the whole summer. So tired, so frustrated. Evie caught her. Stacy, you can't do this. It's going to take a lot of heavy lifting. I'll tell my dad, he can help. No, that's not a good idea. No, it's not a bad idea. It's vacation time. School kids don't go to practice, only adults. That's 3 times a week. He made borscht yesterday out of idleness. Soon he'll start cross-stitching. He'd better do his niece more good by virtue of his great stature. The next day, Kieran came. Stacy felt so embarrassed. He'd think she was the sort of girl who'd look for an excuse to lure him into the house. Every single woman in the village tried that. I don't want anything, she said. I didn't ask for it. I can manage on my own. She thought Kieran grinned. That's a waste, Stacy thought. The awkwardness was gone. So angry, he grinned. You'll only be needed as a tractor, she jerked her chin and pointed with a royal gesture, the shovel is over there. Kieran was visible from the window first. She pretended not to be at all interested in what he was doing there, but she tried to peek discreetly. No sympathy for this man with a nasty temper, of course. But to say he wasn't handsome would be a sin against the truth. Then Kieran moved to another corner. You couldn't see him from the window. Stacy fiddled around. No, she couldn't see him. After about 3 hours, Stacy thought she was being indecent. He's working hard, and she didn't even offer him water. She took the bottle, walked behind the house, and was stunned to see there were no bushes. 5 gorgeous cherry trees along the fence, some bushes. Just a delight. Kieran was tired and asked for water to wash his face. Stacy brought a bucket of water. Kieran took off his t-shirt and splashed in the bucket. Stacy didn't look, but her eyes somehow squinted in that direction. Digit came through the wicket. Wow, she whispered. What's with the mating games? Why, it's the season, isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't it? What are you talking about? Stacy was outraged. He was sent to me with the idea of making friends with you two. He's worried about his daddy. I'd be worried too if I were you. You're a good daddy, but he's no good for you, smirked Digit. He's no good for friendship. Only for love. Digit, stop mocking me. What are you here for? If you're visiting, shall we go inside? No, Stacy, I'm not visiting. I'm here to formally invite you to the wedding. Oh, you've really made up your mind, haven't you? You've brainwashed me so much I realize there's no more time to waste. The wedding's in a month. Of course, I could have brought the invitations later. But I'm so excited, I wanted to share it with someone. Digit turned to Kieran. Kieran. Can you hear me? I'm inviting you to the wedding. Why him? Stacy whispered so Kieran wouldn't hear. You don't know him at all. It's a whim of mine. I invite whoever I want. Digit waved her hand. Well, I'm off. The groom's waiting. Digit left. Kieran sat on the porch and Stacy didn't know what to do next. She was grateful, of course. Maybe she should take him out to dinner. She envisioned lunch, sitting across from each other, chewing and not saying a word. It's like a romantic date. If she didn't think of something now, he'd leave. Isn't that what she dreamed of? And now what? You're looking for a reason to delay. What, did you like him or inspire him? You want to get married? Yes, I did. I can't hide it. Not everyone would go to a woman who shows her disdain to uproot a cherry tree. Besides, he's so cute. Stacy hadn't thought of what to say yet, but Kieran had already put on his shirt and was about to leave. Evie saved the situation. She flew into the courtyard and gabbled. Oh, Daddy, I'm glad you're still here. Let's take Stacy to dinner. Stacy, you have no idea how good a cook he is. He also plays the guitar. What, at the same time? Stacy grinned. No, alternating. So, is it settled? Have you and your dad agreed on this proposal? Well, I don't mind, Kieran cut in. That's it. It's settled. We'll see you tonight. They left, and Stacy was surprised. Wow, this is all working out so well. I didn't have to make the first move myself. Kieran and Evie were walking home and he was singing. You're a clever and beautiful girl, but I think it's time you were whipped. Dad, you weren't faking it, were you? I see you like Stacy, don't you? What would you do without me? Thank you. Thank you. You'd be running around in circles for another year. It's too late for a whipping. 10 years too late, Kieran grinned. Stacy was going out, pulling out almost her entire closet to find an outfit that wasn't too flashy. He'd think she'd dressed up for him. It's boring. It's unfashionable. Here's a light-colored sundress with little flowers. Modest, but tasteful. God, if someone told me that I would dress up and be nervous before a meeting with a former athlete, desirable, I would spit in his face. That's how fate turned, Stacy thought as she dressed up and worried. So she got dressed up and went out. And then Aunt Esmeralda peeked out from behind the fence. In this village you can't go anywhere without supervision. Well, where are you dressed up? She asked. He's a good man, he's doing the right thing. Stacy realized that the village was already aware of their affair and was counting when the wedding was to take place. It's understandable to be bored and want to be colorful, but not to this extent, she thought. Though let them count, maybe it will come in handy. Dinner had been excellent. I couldn't believe Kieran had made it. How could she not? There's no restaurants here you can't order in. Evie was radiant, talking only about Daddy, how wonderful he was and what a sporting career he'd had. The girl really wanted Daddy to be happy. She remembered Mommy, remembered what love was like. But Mom is gone. She couldn't let her daddy live his life alone. She really liked Stacy. And she noticed that Stacy was looking at Daddy with interest. Evie's goal was to get them together. And if a child is up to something, parents are powerless. Kieran and Stacy had another fight. Everything was fine, talking, joking. Turns out Kieran isn't a letter at all. He's a very nice person. Stacy, who put you up to this? She's been going on about boxing not being a sport for girls. It's like stepping on a sore spot. For years, Kieran's been instilling in his daughter a fighter's character. Almost raised a champion. Now some inner-city franchise teacher who knows nothing about professional sports says his daughter should give up boxing. Yes, they embroider cross-stitch, but she can stand up for herself, resented Kieran. If someone hurts you, you will cry, but she will fight back. She'll grow up to be a strong sportswoman. Maybe it's my ambition. But I want my daughter to be a champion. If you had kids, you'd understand. He was hurt. This woman doesn't know anything, but her words hurt. He finally liked a man, but it was like they were from different universes. They couldn't understand each other. Stacy walked home. Evie caught up with her. Evie, go home. I'm sorry I hurt your daddy again. There's something I want to tell you. I think it's time. Kieran and Kira were a nationally known couple. He was a Russian champion, a brutal macho, virile and strong. She was a slim and delicate model whose photos were everywhere on billboards, on TV, on the internet. Kira gave up her career as soon as she found out she was pregnant. No doubt she does not need this whole show business, house, husband, child, nothing else. The birth was awaited with trepidation. The name was chosen long and carefully, but they did not agree. Kira wanted to call her daughter Jessica. She loved the sea very much. Kieran insisted on Evie. When Evie was born, the parents thought it was a miracle. It was useless to say that they were not the first, they were not the last, and others also had children, others just had children. But theirs was a miracle. Kieran wanted his daughter to be called Evie, so he secretly registered the child from Kira and brought the birth certificate, which clearly said Adams Evie Kiranovna. Kira loved her husband so much that she didn't take offense and didn't say a word against it. Evie. So Evie, no matter what you call it, still a miracle extraordinary. Kira took care of the house and the baby. Kieran was lost in training and competitions. He became Russian champion 3 times and was going to the World Championships. And he was 6 years old when his mom got sick. Evie didn't understand what her mom was sick with, but she saw that her mom was in a lot of pain. It's now she knows that mom had advanced stage cancer. They tried to treat her, looked for specialists, wrote to foreign clinics, all in vain. The worst thing was the feeling of hopelessness, the impossibility to change anything. Kieran never left his wife's side. Constant care, medication by the hour. Everyone knew Kira was dying, tried to keep her with him for a while. After his wife's death, Kieran refused to take part in the World Championships, and the risk was too great to entrust Evie to his relatives. He couldn't leave her to anyone, not even for a day. It seemed to betray Kira. The sports career was over, only coaching was left. And Evie dragged him everywhere with him. Slowly he started coaching. She liked it, and she had the ability. His pupils consistently became prize winners in competitions. He was proud of their successes. Life settled down. The longing for Kira did not go anywhere, but somehow subsided. But then the management of the club changed, and the new director began to hint that medals are good, but money is better. Kieran was not going to mix sport and business. He quit his job and moved to the countryside with his daughter. At least things are fair here, he said. While Evie sat in Stacy's kitchen, her dad poured his heart out to Vincent. What about it? No. Look, it pisses me off. What kind of woman is she? Everything's wrong. Well, don't go to her, come on. I can't. As much as she pisses me off, she likes it when she's conquered. That's the pithy man talk. Stacy seemed like Arabella in front of Kieran, and after what was said, Evie felt like a complete fool who, knowing nothing about the man, managed to judge and, worse, instruct. How many times had Stacy berated herself for her language? To keep your mouth shut. Stacy tried to see less of Kieran. Stacy seemed innocent, but it was scary to look Kieran in the eye. And he'd come over, clean the lot, fix up the house. Of course they met, and Stacy's heart sank, but she didn't have the courage to talk. Who would she ask for advice? Wilkie, of course. It had been a while since they'd gossiped. It's time. Stacy spilled every last drop. She didn't hide anything. Wilkie didn't see what the problem was. Any competition? Any takers? No competitors. If you don't like it, you like it. Too much. Girl, I don't understand you. You go off to the middle of nowhere and stumble upon a prince. What's wrong? The prince's horse is dead, and he can't get there on foot. Do I have to propose to him myself? No. Wait a minute. I'll come back in a couple of weeks, and we'll decide what to do. Vincent said conquered how, with the whole estate dug up, the fence repaired, the taps and locks in good order. What else is there to do? In response, silence. All decent, polite, and indifferent. It's no use consulting Vincent. He's already making fun of him. Kieran's pouring out his heart to him, and Petrenko's watching. He's laughing, and he can tell he can barely contain himself from laughing. Alex, do you think it's funny? I'm in front of him, and he's laughing. Yeah, laughing. There's a big guy sitting there and he can't say something about how he feels to a woman he likes. Of course it's funny to you. You got a wife, kids. I want a wife too, by the way. And not just any wife, but a very specific one. You're Vincent, of course, and I'm a boxer. If I hold on now, I risk getting my nose punched. My friend Kieran, when was the last time you climbed into a woman's window? What's windows got to do with it? There are parallels. It's got nothing to do with windows. It's all about the woman. Okay, you're the thin, ironic one. I'm thick, straightforward. Probably dumb, too. I don't get your parable about the windows. Are you hinting? I'm not hinting at the window. Romanticism is the way to go. You shouldn't climb through the window, of course. The result is predictable, either a night in jail or a black eye from a frying pan. Giving flowers is also not an option in our realities. What's Kieran gonna do? Bring her a drugstore chamomile? A rose from Auntie Esmeralda? There's no movie theaters or restaurants. Look, I never realized we were so bad at romance. Vincent sighed. Not much else, and we haven't come up with anything in 3 weeks. Alex's wife, Nelly, ironically in her maiden name of Goncharova, had been eavesdropping for a long time. What are the men talking about? My God, what primitive creatures they are. It is good that God first created them, and then, looking at his creation, decided to improve it. And the result was a woman she resented. When Nelly realized that the men were at an impasse, she decided to intervene. What the hell are flowers? Invite them to a dance at the club. Let the youngsters beat it. Buy a ring and go to propose. And if she says no, of course she'll say no. It would be strange if she agreed to marry me out of the blue. But she'll think about it, start evaluating the pros and cons. And what does that mean? That you, Kieran, will always be in her thoughts, and she won't be able to think of anything else. Only you. Isn't that what you want? Natasha, do you think it will work? Kieran hesitated. It worked for Andrew. Which Andrew, this one or that one? This one, I guess. It doesn't matter, as long as it worked. While Kieran was devising a plan to win Stacy over, she had an unexpected visitor. Vincent had arrived. Stacy was overjoyed. A family man, Alex's son. A reminder of happiness past. Vincent came with the express purpose of persuading Stacy to move back to the city. I've put the apartment on the market. Half of it's yours. Obviously, you can't get the same one, but you're going back to the city, he said. Vince, I would never claim my dad's apartment. We have our own place, Stacy said. But Mom's got a thing for this place. Why are you the main target? I get it. She can't get back at Dad anymore. She's taking it out on you. Vince, why sell? I mean, she was going to live there. She started renovations. She started renovations and she's done with them. Her goal was to torment you, and you just left. It's ruined, Vincent said. She doesn't need this apartment without you. Dima, I'm not going back to the city. Maybe someday, but not now, Stacy said. We'll go for a walk in the countryside. You'll see it's not a shithole at all. Look at my plot of land. I could use the money from the sale of the apartment. I really want a bathhouse. Dimka, how glad I am to see you. And how did you find me? Millie cracked. I won't say. But I thought there's another husband on the way. She didn't even give me a hint. Vincent grinned. Dim, are you coming for a couple days, or are you staying with me? Evie stood in the doorway. Stacy, Dad wants to know if you're coming over for dinner. We've got a guest. I'll go tell him it's dinner for 4, Evie said, and ran off. Sveta, I think I'll stay with you, don't you? Vincent asked. Yes, of course you can. But this girl is the neighborhood boxing champion, so be careful. The village has long since realized what's going on. It's just that these young men can't make up their minds. They're city folk. All those who had their sights on Kieran realized that they were out of luck and nobly stepped aside. I wanted to make a scene, of course. She came here, stole the only decent man, but what was the use? He didn't pay much attention to their charms without her. But you can tell him you loved him so much, but you let him go. Be happy. Noble. Kieran couldn't think of anything romantic to do. Everything seemed fine without the romance. Vincent's arrival somehow made it almost like a family. Lunches and dinners together, conversations over tea. Vincent didn't want to leave the house until almost midnight. And that was good for Kieran. Andrew and Nayli nudged Kieran. Don't be silent. She may not love you yet, but she's definitely interested. If you don't ask, you won't know. And Stacy has a visitor again. And what a guest. Millie's here. Millie's not just visiting, she's on a rescue mission to help her friend who's been missing. It seems Mila had an important event in her life that she wasn't in a hurry to tell her friends about. Her main goal was to help Stacy get back in touch with Kieran. We don't need a prince without a horse. We'll only look at the prince, Millie said after their first dinner together. Sveta, he can't take his eyes off you. He's a gorgeous man. I'm not talking about looks. There's nothing to talk about. He's so monumental in terms of character. A real counselor. Take a good look. You'll never meet another like him. What am I telling you? You know it. But for some reason you're stalling, or rather he's stalling. Well, it doesn't matter. You can push it. Millie, why don't you say something? Are you getting married? Come on, spill the beans, Vincent asked. Millie was indeed getting married. She assured him that she had no mercantile interests in the marriage. Knowing her friend, Stacy doubted that. The fact that she had been introduced to her future husband by her ex-husband suggested something. If it was an artist or a poet, one could believe in pure love without regard for money. But the fate of Millie decided to arrange her second husband, and in his entourage of people who believe in selfless love, there were no. He invited Millie to a pathos reception, where she met a young and handsome businessman, who coincidentally turned out to be unmarried. Now, Millie was doing everything she could to change his single status to married. Millie, besides being single, do you know anything about him? Young, good-looking, rich. What else is there to know? Stacy asked. Well, he's not that young. Do you know exactly how rich he is? Or did someone tell you? He's a businessman. So he's got money. Anyway, I know he's good-looking, Millie joked. Look, you're not a stupid woman, and you're not poor, by the way. I never thought you were someone's prey. You can't even tell me what his business is. What, he never told you? Why didn't you ask? You've always been 3 steps ahead. What happened now? I can't believe you're blinded by mad passion, Stacy said doubtfully. I've never met your businessman, but at his age and his money, you can't be lonely. Millie, are you saying he's a con man? I'm afraid he's an Alfonso. Honey, that's just my impression. I'm not insisting, but take a closer look. Don't be so quick to jump into the deep end. You've already taken the plunge twice. Kieran kept trying to talk to Stacy alone. It wasn't working. It's easy to say, don't be quiet, say it was Joshua, or Vincent following her around. And now Millie was in the way. There was a time and place, of course, but Kieran didn't look for it. He was afraid that if she didn't say anything, there was a chance she'd say no, and he'd have to step aside. And then how to live. One evening, when Joshua and Vincent had gone to the club and Millie had tactfully withdrawn, Kieran made up his mind. Stacy, you can see I like you. You don't have to say anything. If you say you're so nice but I don't want to hear it. I told you so you'd know. You already knew. Now you know for sure. Think it's up to you. Roma, I don't know what to say, Stacy replied, confused. It's good that you don't know, but I have something to ask. Or rather, advice. Kieran gave her daughter a shocked look. He'd raised her to be an athlete, a champion, and suddenly she said she wanted to be a lawyer. Why all of a sudden? All that hard work, all that training, all that success. Now it's all for nothing. And she won't listen to anything. I got a job on vacation as an assistant at a law firm. I drive every morning to the neighborhood of law offices. Since September, I've been enrolled in pre-law classes. I'm determined to go to law school. What do you want her to do? Become a champion? Then what? Ever wonder how your daughter will live after she finishes, no matter how brilliant her athletic career, with no education, no family, no kids? Stacy said, don't tell me you can do it all. You know you can't. Your daughter is wiser than you are. Don't let her get in the way. Stacy and Kieran had no way of having a romantic conversation, almost quarreling. Stacy decided to consult Millie. If her decision was firm, Stacy would back her up and Dad couldn't resist the two of them. Kieran couldn't think of anything romantic to do. He suspected Pushkin was mocking, but the idea of climbing through the window kept coming up. What do you mean romantic? Well, it's like a magic wand Digit's wedding. Kieran was preparing for Digit's wedding as if it were his own. He was even more excited. What's a newlywed couple to worry about? They've got it all figured out. He had total uncertainty. The wedding was a village wedding. Neighbors dragged pickles, homemade sausage, roasted chickens, compotes to Digit's house. The men had built a table for half a yard and benches to match. Digit's girlfriends made up riddles for the bride price and contests. Stacy was invited to the wedding, but she refused when she saw their tasks for the groom merely crossing the boundaries of propriety. How did you guys have fun in the city? We have the internet. We see your flowery jokes. We don't expose our lips and other body parts. We don't change sex. That's embarrassing. And we're just having fun, the bridesmaids parried. The wedding was epochal. On the bride's side was one village, on the groom's side another. The bride has a richer village, and the groom has stronger men. The fight did not happen, although earlier the saying, "What wedding without a fight," was relevant. The bride justified the nickname Monkey, then grabbed the hem of her mother's lush dress, then hung on Alexa. Contests, jokes, toasts, songs, dances, people were having a lot of fun. Not often in the village there are events of such scale. They say that if the guests sing a lot at a wedding, the life of young people will be cheerful and happy. Now there will be enough talk for a month they will retell who did and said what. The heroes of these stories will say, "It never happened." Maybe it didn't. It doesn't matter. And the annals of the village has already been entered, and with each retelling will be added new colorful details. If this omen works, then Digit and Alex will be the happiest people in the world. They'll also laugh on and off. Vince, the accordion player, played all night with a drink break. Did he have time for an appetizer? No, the people demanded songs. They sang the most heartfelt ones. There are so many golden lights, oh Kalina blossoms on the Morom Road. And of course Vladimirsky Central. And Central sounded especially heartfelt, although there were no prisoners in the village. Due to the fact that Vince did not have time to snack, in 3 hours we were left without an accordion. The young people rejoiced. At last we can turn on some normal music. Of course they did, but after about 10 minutes the older ones demanded, "Turn off this crap and turn on something soulful." The guys didn't know what was soulful for them, so they turned on Disco 80s. They got it right. Even those who never got up from a chair went dancing. To the song "Where the Maple Trees Are Noisy," Kieran walked up to Stacy and held out his hand. On the river wave. Stacy put her hand on Kieran's shoulder. Talked about love with you, she thought. They were dancing. Kieran thought, this is romance, and then suddenly it sounded, love is like a dream, it's gone. What do you mean it's gone? It hasn't started yet. Wrong song, he thought. No, it was the maple trees noisy. Stacy's heart sank. She wanted to tell her love so badly, but it seemed like a man should be the first to say. Kieran didn't talk about love, but he did say he'd take a step after her. No, I can't take that step. Why don't you say something, you chump with no feelings? Stacy chastised herself. The wedding was in full swing. There was singing and dancing, and Stacy suddenly remembered her and Alex. She remembered the wedding without longing, without hopelessness, with sadness, sorrow, and gratitude. For the first time since Alex's death, thinking about him was just a bright memory. But the tears did come. To avoid spoiling people's holiday, Stacy got up from the table, walked out of the courtyard, and walked toward the river. She didn't want to let go of her thoughts about Alex. The stinging sadness didn't hurt anymore. Stacy felt like Alex was letting her go. It was as if Mila had heard a voice. Go on living, be happy. Don't rush back to me, I'll wait. Kieran followed Stacy, but Millie stopped him. Don't let her be alone. She's saying goodbye to the past. Don't bother her. Millie didn't let Kieran go, she followed. That's it, she realized. Stacy's not going back to town. Her fate is a bit stymied here, but she's not going anywhere, Millie thought. That's what makes her so short-tempered. She deserves such a trustworthy man. Hey, what's her bad luck? She's always getting some fake prints. I just want to be loved. I guess to be loved, you have to love yourself. Fate is like a boomerang. It gives you what you put into the world. Stacy knows how to love, but Kieran is still calculating and guessing. I guess he miscalculated, Millie pondered. Well, what are we young and beautiful? We've got time for more. Millie found Stacy. She was sitting on the bank, looking out at the slow river. Millie sat down beside her and put her arm around her. Don't be sad, girlfriend. Say, are you going back? Not right now. The school year's just started. I can't just quit. It's a bit scary, of course. How will I live here in winter? But other people live here. They won't let you go to waste. Of course they won't. Especially a big one like that. Millie laughed. It's so funny to look at you. It's like Beauty and the Beast. The Beast is very handsome, though, and he can't take his eyes off you. Millie, what the hell do I want? I can't get Alex back. Does Kieran love me? Why do I get such great men? What's wrong with you? You're a bit hasty on the get part. Millie, what am I supposed to do? I like Kieran. Joshua wants his daddy. He's doing everything he can to push him. Vince has joined us. He's been here for 2 days. He's been staying for 2 weeks. It all makes sense. I like it. I don't get it. Honey, I can't just tell him I love him. He's healthy. He's strong. He's not afraid of anyone but me. Nothing. We'll get through the winter, and then we'll see. I'm going home tomorrow. I came to save you, but there's no one to save you from. I'm going to deal with my businessman and my ex-husband at the same time. Kieran glanced furtively at Stacy, though he wanted to look at her without stopping. He thought that fate had given him a chance to be happy again by sending this wonderful woman, but there was no way he dared to accept this gift. Fate might get angry. What could be easier, a hug, a kiss, to tell her how much I love her, he pondered. On Nayli's advice, he even bought a ring, even though he thought it was foolish. Stacy thought it was impossible to step into the same river twice. She was already happy with Alex and wouldn't be able to love like that again. But love has to be different. With the experience of troubles and mistakes, she decided. Millie's friend is right. Stacy does have luck with men. Fate has kept her from making mistakes. They say fate doesn't choose, but gives you a chance not to make mistakes. I didn't make a mistake with Alex, and I won't forget him. Just as Kieran will never forget his wife. We have similar destinies. One grief for both of us. Then happiness must be shared, Stacy thought. She hoped that if Kieran didn't dare to speak, their shared happiness might not happen. Come on, Kieran, say something, she mentally pleaded. Kieran didn't say anything. Kieran did. He hugged Stacy, kissed her, and pulled a ring box from his pocket. Stacy, will you marry me? He asked. Stacy was confused. There was such a look of bewilderment on her face that Kieran laughed. That's exactly the reaction I was expecting, he said. That's what Nayli said. What Nayli before Pushkin said that. You'll say no, but you'll think about it. Or will you not refuse? I know it's foolish to hope you'll say yes right away. But you'll take the ring. You'll look at it and think of me. Stacy smiled enigmatically and pressed herself tighter against Kieran. She thought to herself that she was already thinking about him.